Can you hear us online? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sure. We're going to kick off today's meeting with just a quick roll call. We'll go around the room and then the various online. Just say your name. We can start with.
Greg Fell, Arkansas Basin Committee Current Chair. Glad to be here joining you.
Bo Schaefer, Governor's appointee, former board member of Left-Hand Water District and current water consultant in Boulder County and Eastern Well County.
Julie.
Conservation Board.
Dan Gibbs, Chair. John Kerman, South Mount Basin. Rick Marstick, Metro Roundtable. Ken Runner, Mike Green, Basin Roundtable.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Amy Aspect of Interstate Commerce. Good morning, I'm Lisa Darling, Metro Roundtable and South Metro Water Supply Authority.
Terry Stander, Arkansas Basin Grant.
Oh, hello. I'm Jeff Rodriguez, CWCB.
Oh, Viola Bralish, CWCB.
Peter Fleming, General Counsel of the district. Andy is in jury.
Director for water for, yeah, we're going to the time and keep there. Oh my God. There.
I think they're having a hard time hearing us. It sounds like maybe some of us. So I think just try to speak up a little bit.
Right, but you don't want to mess these up. Big heavy piece of equipment on your building site and then not be able to put up your time frame. What is it?
Jairus, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Jairus Danielson, Arkansas Basin.
I think
I get
Carrie Aloya for Rio Grande.
Hi, I'm Carrie Loya from the Rio Grande Basin. I'm new to this board.
Kevin, you want to go next?
Sure, this is Kevin Ryan from the State Engineer's Office. I'm the state engineer.
Jeff, you're next.
Okay, I think you meant me, and I'm Jeff Myers. I am a representative from Yampa White Green and a rancher up here in Routt County. I apologize for not being there in person. I know that you held this meeting on the Western Slope to make it easier for us from the Western Slope to attend, but ranching just kind of swelled up and kept me from being there with you. Sorry.
And Curtis?
Ken Curtis, Southwestern.
Melly Whiting?
Yes, good morning. Melly Whiting. I'm a governor appointee. I'm also sitting the Southwest Basin Roundtable, and I also apologize for not being there in person this time.
Director Sakata.
Sakata?
Everybody, Robert Sakata, Sakata Farms, right in Colorado, CWCB board member.
Steve Wolf?
Good morning, it's Steve Wolf. I'm the alternate for the Southwestern Basins.
Kevin Terry? Kevin Terry?
Good morning, everybody. I'm from the Rio Grande Basin. I'm a new appointee to the IBCC from the Basin Roundtable.
Russ?
Hey everybody, Russ Sands, CWCB section chief. I'm a little under the weather today, so I apologize for not being there too, but I'll be here for the meeting.
Anybody else?
Hearing none. We'll walk through the agenda for today. We'll just finalize our meeting script. We have forum and we've gone through our meeting minutes. We're recording, so I think we are go for today.
Well, thanks, Scott. And you know, Scott's fitting for today. And last time, we hope you get some today. This thing. And great to see you all here in the. So it's been a few months since we covered it. And this is person. I think we have really great definitely for us today. We also, I know there's been interest in budget revision. Board and research. Bill. Well, look, the challenge for go around the room. Want to give a warm welcome Gary. From very big man. Previously had that. Before we turn it over, I want to really special thank you to Viola. She is always just so amazing at setting up all the great spots. They're just absolutely amazing. So let's give Ronald a check out. Before I turn it over, anything for me?
Online here better.
Yeah.
All right, Dan.
Let's, for folks that are online, take a few minutes. Can you all hear me at all? Give me a thumbs up or something.
And we're just hearing like very little bursts. I heard you say, for example, for folks online and then nothing after that. So it's very muffled.
Okay, let's folks that are online, let's just take a few minutes to see if we can improve this to make sure that the folks that are online can hear us. Okay.
We're gonna try to improve the audio, so just give us a minute or two to try and figure out if we can improve the audio for you all online.
Yeah, well, this is probably the right time to mention. Trust me.
Thanks again.
The word meat, is the last. These all these walls pulled away. All these walls pulled away. And so this is one giant room. 300 feet square. So there we go. Hear me. But anyways, pretty close. This is the thing. Yes.
How did they put still muffled?
Is it still muffled? Testing. Yeah. Good news. I think there's any dollars. You call me, I'm at 97. Oh, that's. I realized what I was thinking. Oh, we still have to say that. We're creating a steakhouse. That's a hell of yeah, I want to come over when we.
Yeah.
No, I got it. That's a hell of a computer.
The afternoon meetings later in the summer or earlier in the winter. Okay, we're good. I think we can. That was you. I was like, oh, I mean, do you want mine?
Well, you've got mine, so just send me a text.
Okay, testing, can you hear me or should we use the microphone?
Much better.
Carrie or someone over here.
Much better. Can you hear us?
Oh, can you hear us?
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Russ or someone say something so we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear us? Hello, can you hear us? I don't think you can hear us.
It's okay, you got it. This is an easy one.
Oh, don't speak too soon.
Russ, maybe try and say something.
Hello? Hello, can you hear us? We hear you.
Okay. Well, it's good. So everyone can hear me fine now, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me kind of rewind a little bit. I just want to welcome you all to Glenwood Springs. And last time we met was in February. Seems like yesterday we met at the Spur campus. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time for the folks that are able to be here in person, but also recognize that, you know, summertime is busy, doesn't matter what position you have. And I'm just glad that also people are able to participate virtually as well. So just grateful for you all. And also, we were thanking Viola before, but I just want to make sure we thank Viola. She really works really hard to find the right spots for these meetings, and you always find the best locations, and so thank you.
Not so much for audio and video.
Well, we're working this out.
Jeff.
I want to also, you know, welcome the new members, Carrie from the Rio Grande, Carrie from the North Platte, as well as Kevin from the Rio Grande as well. And before I kind of talk about what we have in the agenda, I'd love to kind of turn it over to some of the new members. So we just kind of get us more of a snapshot of who they are and kind of their interests and so forth. So Carrie, if I could turn it over to you first, and then I'll turn it over to the new members online, and just a little bit about yourself for everyone.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually grew up on the Green River in Wyoming. I studied range management and wildlife biology in college, and then I did some work for the Forest Service and some wildlife consulting agencies. So I've always been interested in land management and water and all of that. I then became interested in ag economics since I come from a ranching family, and I married into another ranching family, so I went back and studied that. And I'm just working on the family ranch right now, which I'm really enjoying. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, involved with IBCC. So thank you.
Great. Well, welcome, Carrie. Now online for some of the new members. Carrie, I can't remember your last name from the Rio Grande. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Carrie Aloya, newly appointed. Sorry I couldn't be there. I already had something going on today, so look forward to the November meeting. I have a wetland consulting business in the San Luis Valley, and I've been going to roundtable meetings since they started 25 years ago or so, and work with a lot of partners, private landowners, state and federal agencies, and just excited to be here and learn more about the other basins.
Okay, welcome, Carrie. Thanks for joining us. And then also Kevin, also from the Rio Grande. If you could introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Hey folks, I'm Kevin Terry. I'm also from the Rio Grande. You get two newbies from the Rio. I work for Trout Unlimited, the Western Water and Habitat Program here in the Valley. I've been with TU since 2013. Before that, I was a fisheries biologist for the Jicarilla Apache Nation in northern New Mexico. So my background's in fisheries. In the Valley, I kind of split my time on flow restoration, multi-benefit flow restoration with the community, looking to make water work as hard as possible. And I also work on reintroducing Rio Grande cutthroat trout to their native range here in the Valley. I'm excited to be a part of this group, and I wish I could have been there today, but just got totally booked up.
Great, it's all right. We're glad you can join us virtually. And good, well, welcome to new members. Really appreciate you being involved. And just kind of walking through the agenda today, the legislative session finished up, I believe, was it May 8th, I believe, I think, May 6th or May 8th. Very busy legislative session. Kelly Romero-Heaney will go over some of the highlights from the Department of Natural Resources perspective, but I also would love to hear any bills that you all were tracking as well, and topics regarding bills. And then also Colorado River issues are high stakes, to say the least, and we're really glad to have Amy Ostick here with us as well to give us a Colorado River update. And then maybe along with that, there's been a lot of discussions, and I know many of you have been following the Colorado River package legislative budget proposal that passed, and we can also talk about kind of what's next in terms of what that really means for positions and how we're staffing up and so forth. So we'll include a discussion. You know, Amy, you can join in on that too, and maybe Kevin Ryan, who's online, and Kelly and myself. And then also about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, I challenged you all to really look at your own basins to try to get some projects off the ground that you could be a champion on. So I'm really interested in hearing kind of what is going well with that, what is not, what you all are working on, and how we can all work together and collaborate. I think there's always great, lessons learned that we can all kind of hear from. And then I'm trying to think, and then after that as well, we want to get an update too from Lisa and Ken on the C9 summit. That's probably in the very early stages, to say the least, but just something, especially for the new members, of kind of like, what is that and what we're hoping to accomplish with that. I think that'd be really great as well. Does that sound good for everyone? Yeah. Okay, great. So let's move to legislative updates. It was a really busy legislative year. From my perspective, I just thinking of some of the natural resources stuff, like for the bills that we were really tracking, I was originally thinking, okay, it's not going to be as challenging or hectic as maybe the previous year. But I was wrong. It was busy and hectic, and I think shit no better. And I think there are a lot of challenging bills that came up late in the legislative session, which also adds a lot of pressure and challenges as well. And from my perspective again too, I think a lot of people are kind of recuperating. It's kind of like, what happened, and how do we do things better, and how do we work with legislators and so forth. But let me turn it over to Kelly to kind of give her perspective and some of the bills that we were championing that everyone should be aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Again, Kelly Romero-Heaney, Assistant Director for Water for DNR. Can you all hear me online okay? Good. Yeah, just let me know if you can't, and I'll speak up more. Oh, Russ says yes, thumbs up. That's perfect. As Dan said, we didn't expect this legislative session to be quite as wild as it ended up being. I think part of that is a lot of the work kind of got crammed in the last few weeks of this session. And so we ended up in committee hearings till 3 a.m., 1 a.m., definitely a lot of sleep deprivation at the Capitol. So it was pretty rough. But I think a huge shout out goes to DNR's legislative director, Daphne Gervais. We sold her from CCI, from Colorado Counties Incorporated, and just threw her into the Capitol right at the start of session. And she just knocked it out of the park and had to deal with some really challenging bills and issues, etc. And so
We were just so grateful for the good work that she did for the department and really for, for water and the state as a whole. So shout out to Daphne. Even though it was a challenging legislative session, we do believe that it was a huge year for water. Even though that didn't necessarily catch all the headlines, I think there's a ton that we can celebrate. And not the least of which is the FTEs that we were able to get secured in the long bill, which was Senate Bill 23-214. The long bill is the big budget bill. And you all are well aware, I know we've talked about it before, how DNR had put in for about 14 FTEs to build out, really build out our Colorado River policy and technical team across our divisions. Again, we were able to create a full-time position for the Colorado River Commissioner so that our commissioner, Becky Mitchell, can just really dedicate her full time to that. And that's going to be huge. I think really put Colorado in an even stronger position, really hopefully support Becky too, because she had a lot on her plate. And we, Colorado River issues are going to continue to be really tricky from here on out. There's no going back. So we're really excited we got support for that. We also got a new communications manager that will be within the executive director's office along with the commissioner. We got a lot of technical and hydrology, hydrographer staff for Division of Water Resources. DWR is general funded, and so it can be really tricky for us to add FTE. So we were thrilled to be able to secure those positions. I think we got 8.5 FTEs for DWR and here on the West Slope. And if we've learned anything in this last year with our interstate negotiations, is that we really lead with our math and truth, right? Like our numbers so high, and the better our numbers, the more that we can throw those technical resources at the issue, I think we are in an even stronger position. So we're thrilled about that. We'll also be adding a federal policy person in CWCB, some other staff. Other wins unrelated to Colorado River is we got a water plan data and mapping specialist. So really help ensure that we're implementing water plan grants and the water plan more equitably across the state and even, across interests. We also for CPW got $500,000 to support wildlife water and research projects. A lot of that will help with all the work that goes into the fish and wildlife mitigation plans associated with water projects. That's been a real heavy lift for CPW. There's, again, a lot of really great things in the long bill. Speaking of budgets, however, I'll say another huge win was the CWC projects bill, which was Senate Bill 23-177. And on Monday, Dan and I and Sean was there. I'm trying to think anybody else was there. So we all met in Summit County at the Swan River Restoration Project site. Just really close to Dan's house, just over the hill from Dan's house, and the governor signed 3 bills: the project bill, Species Conservation Trust Fund, and then Senate Bill 270, which I'll talk about here in a bit. But it was incredible to be in that setting with the governor. Great. Sean came and we, had all these stakeholders out there. 10-mile range in the background, Swan River, restored Swan River in the background. It was incredible. But this is. And Senator Roberts and Speaker McCluskey were there as well. I mean, this is the biggest projects bill, and it's an annual bill. But we have over $90 for, $90 million for water projects in Colorado, and that's huge. And not the least of which is $25 million for water plan grant funding. And what we've learned in the last couple of years is we can almost quadruple our return on investment for water plan grant funding, particularly with all the federal dollars that are available. So it's such a critical time for us to be able to secure that funding. Other highlights: $34 million for endangered species recovery programs on both sides of the divide, including the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program and the Platte River Recovery Program. Really important, not just for the species in the environment, but also for regulatory compliance with water projects in Colorado. We also got $20 million for the Arkansas Valley Conduit, bringing safe and clean drinking water to communities in southeastern plains. $1 million for water forecasting, another $500,000 for watershed restoration, I mean, just incredible bill. So we were thrilled to have that signed. BC Conservation Trust Fund up Senate bill, or excuse me, House Bill 23-1274 that authorized $5 million of severance tax money to go towards endangered and threatened and species of concern recovery. So about half of that went to the CWCB for a recovery program efforts, flow restoration, selenium, and the selenium program, and then also the other half went to Colorado Parks and Wildlife for aquatic and terrestrial habitat projects. And then finally, Senate Bill, not finally, but also Senate Bill 23-270, the governor signed that on Monday. And this was the stream restoration bill that I had talked about at our last IBCC meeting. And it was pretty controversial, right? We were asking a lot of the water community. Basically, we're looking to make it allow stream restoration projects to occur without needing to secure a water right or go through a water court process. Just really clarifying that if a restoration project will occur within the natural footprint or historic footprint of a stream, at least this is what we initially had led with, that would be allowed. There was a lot of concern, we heard that we just need to have more conversation to understand this better. So we trimmed down, there was an amendment to the bill, trimmed it down, and we ended up with a bill that allows for minor stream restoration activities that really don't have that same risk or concern for water rights. And so these are projects like big stabilization projects that don't push water outside of the natural channel. Flood and fire recovery efforts, really critical, particularly for our water providers. Wet meadows restoration of strip on ephemeral streams, and a host of others. I'm happy to talk more about that, but we were thrilled that the water community really stepped up and supported kind of that smaller, more limited version, but ended with, it doesn't mean that we're done having the conversation. So we really look forward to seeing kind of where the water community is at on sort of that kind of bigger question, how, do we want to carve out space for projects that are reconnecting channels and floodplains, those projects that we know really provide a lot of ecological uplift. So drill the 270 passed, we'll see where it goes from here. There was also some smaller bills, House Bill 23-1125, modernizing the process to obtain water well information. That was a DWR kind of technical fix, really sort of simplifying and clarifying well permit documentation. Also Senate Bill 2392, agricultural producers use of agrivoltaics. CWCB will have to conduct a feasibility study in consultation with the state engineer and Colorado Energy Office, Colorado Water Institute, and looking at photovoltaics, which involves solar energy generation facilities placed over floating irrigation canals or reservoirs. Another one, House Bill 23-1220, was the Republican River Groundwater Economics Study. Again, this wasn't one of our bills, but legislators from the Eastern Plains really wanted to better understand the economic risk associated with not meeting compact obligations in the Republican River Basin. Like what could that do if they can't meet their obligations and by 2029? And so I think that information would be really valuable. Just pivoting for a moment here, there were some real wins on wildfire mitigation and forest health. And Dan, you're probably more up to speed on some of these than I, but I don't know, like co-swap program, we were able to secure, it got a one-time investment of $11 million in the current fiscal year, and $6 million continuous annual funding for that program. So it really helps to establish co-swap, which is the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Plan program in the DNR that's been wildly successful, I'd say, Dan.
Yeah, with that, it's wonderful when you get a call from a joint budget committee member that recognizes, okay, we submitted $5 million, for this program. And it was Barbara Kirkmeyer, Senator Kirkmeyer, but she said, Dan, we know the value of this program. And guess what? We're going to vote to approve, $5 million more than what you asked for this year, but also make it a continuing appropriation moving forward. So that was just kind of like, I kind of felt like I won the lottery. Can I get this an ID? Right over here? It's great news.
Yeah. Well, and there's just been such a recognition that wildfire and watershed issues are inextricably linked, right? And so I think a lot of the work that we've been doing around that space, all of you, really beating that drum is literally paying off. You know, there are also House Bill 23-1060 adds another $5 million to the Colorado State Forest Service tree nursery. Again, there's a real water nexus here because we need plant material to recover from wildfires. Also need riparian vegetation, willows, cottonwoods, those seedlings to help do some of the important river riparian restoration projects that we need. So that was in addition to 5 million that they got last year, the 10 million that they needed to really double up. I think it was doubling they'll be able to double their capacity at the State Forest Service nursery in Fort Collins. So I think that's a big win for water as well.
And I'll just add,
Yeah.
when you look at some of the large scale wildfires that we've had in Colorado historically, you know, in 2020, we had, you know, a few that were over 200,000 acres, and you look back at Cayman Fire, which was 136,000 acres, I believe, or 138. But we've only done revegetation on about 1% of those land branch fires. So in many cases, revegetation occurs naturally, depending on fuel type and so forth, but quite often it really just, you know, scorches the soils and it really makes revegetation a real challenge. So to really ramp up this nursery program is really beneficial for Colorado, but also we're going to be able to export seedlings as well to other states that are also doing this.
Yeah, that's a big win. So I am going to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 23-295, which was the Colorado River Drought Task Force. But before I do that, I'd like to just pause and see if there are any questions, thoughts, reflections from the legislative session, anything I talked about.
Do you have a good location where we can see this entire list of accomplishments that you claim?
You know, I think our communications director, Chris Aaron, might have just sent out. I hope we'll make sure it got to IBCC members.
You were really, we actually, sent out kind of it's a synopsis, the highlights from the Department of Natural Resources, so it's not just water, but it's kind of like, hey, it's been a big year legislatively. This is kind of a recap. And I think Chris sent that out just maybe an hour ago, so maybe we can get that to Kat or Russ or Viola and make sure we get that out to everyone. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, just incredible. Good job.
Good job.
Great job.
Well, just to follow up too, you know, any other like bills that Kelly didn't mention too, that you were all working on as well, that would be worthwhile for us to talk about or just be aware of?
Kelly, you referenced probably coming back to the stream restoration conversation again. You have, I'm just curious, are there takeaways from this year in terms of maybe your approach or kind of how you would go about determining what might fly that is, you know, maybe getting closer to the goal that you were working on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. I think takeaways for me is like the water community is supportive of healthy rivers. Like everybody wants to see our rivers be healthy, and we have not just for their intrinsic value, but for the utility of them, right? We need clean drinking water, we need wildfire protection, flood protection, all of that, right? And so that was a takeaway, but they need more time to discuss it and really understand when we say stream restoration, what does that mean? And some folks work on these projects more than others. And so I think we need to do a lot of field trips, panel discussions, webinars, all of it. I think the other piece is DNR was really the lead on getting the conversation started. So there were times, and you know, we might have felt a little bit kind of out there on a limb. And so I think that we want to move forward if there is support to really move forward with a bill that kind of addresses this other question. And then I think the other piece is, you know, for a long time, everybody felt pretty comfortable if a restoration project was just going to restore to some sort of pre-disturbance condition. and the project proponent could prove that with aerial photos or whatever other accepted method, DWR would take a look at it and say, you know, you're probably gonna be okay. So there seemed like, for many years, that was comfortable for most people. But then when we asked the question, like, well, do we want to codify that? Everybody said, oh, we don't know, you know? So I think that that's something that we need to debate and discuss as a water community. And, so.
Thank you, that helps.
Carrie.
I knew I was gonna ask. So I guess my question is, why is DNR afraid tools that are available to it to augment those extra depletions? If they're trying to believe it is, that the riparian areas are important to save or to maybe even improve, why don't we use the tools that are there and augment those depletions? I mean, that's why it's there. We shouldn't be afraid of going or getting the decree or finding some unique way of doing it and under some kind of an umbrella plan, similar to Upper Arks umbrella plan, but maybe even bigger than that. Why don't we approach it that way in a positive fashion? And then we remove all those impediments that everybody's worried about, and that is injury to existing water rights.
Terry, I think that there's nothing that shouldn't be put on the table for discussion. And like you said, there could be some unique or novel concepts that we could discuss as a water community. I think there was a couple of reasons why we were really seeking to figure out a way that we can at least restore to a natural footprint without a water court process. And that's because two reasons. One, the tools that we use for measuring depletions or consumptive use associated with like the natural vegetation within the riparian corridor, they're the same tools that we use if we're taking water out of the river, out, you know, far away from the river system, out to, you know, upland farm ground. And water just moves through that differently than a very complicated, you know, geologic, exchange, surface water, groundwater exchange to the hyperrate zone, to the floodplain, etc. And so the tools we're using to measure depletions aren't calibrated for kind of the complexity of our natural stream systems. So I think that was a piece of it. I think the other challenge, Sarah, is we don't have, and there's not, I know there's a master augmentation plan that you manage and have in place in the Upper Ark, but it's pretty, a lot of the areas where we need to do stream restoration, particularly in the headwaters, as we're looking at, you know, long-term forest health issues, watershed protection issues, it'd be impossible to get a master augmentation plan under existing laws, all the way up to the headwaters. And so I think that's one of the limiting factors. And so with every project ends up having to go through a water court process, and probably see those projects not move forward.
Well, I agree, it's a challenge, but I think it can be done.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's
what we should.
discussed it. Yeah.
Doing it the right way.
Mhm.
And getting those tools, you know, before 1969, everybody said the same thing. We don't have the tools to do it. We can't do it. And lo and behold, on the Arkansas basin, Kansas had to sue us before we decided to find the tools. And then we found the tools, we did it. And I think it's the same story now. I think we can find those tools, but we got to work toward that instead of trying to avoid the obvious.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, you know, to consider is we certainly allow for other uses without someone needing to get a water right, like household exempt wells, which there are far more of those than there'll ever be stream restoration projects. But then the other piece is, like, for example, open pit mines, gravel mines, you know, they don't have to augment the historic natural depletion. So if they can show where the historic natural vegetation was, that gets subtracted out of their obligations. If we were to do the same for stream restoration projects, it would probably be a net zero. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to be discussing, Terry, and I know that you are going to be at the table. And I look forward to it too, Terry. So, what else? And before I get to 295.
No other bills?
All right. Okay, so so again, Senate Bill 23-295 was the Colorado River Drought Task Force. The governor signed this, I think, a couple weeks ago here in Glenwood, at the Two Rivers Park. And this bill stands up a task force of 17 members that will recommend legislative concepts that would to stand up a voluntary compensated and Colorado River drought security program. I think, let's see, we've got representatives, DNR has one seat on the task force, and actually, let me take a step back here real quick. This was not a DNR priority bill. This was a bill that was really led by Senator Roberts and Speaker McCluskey, and they got a lot of co-sponsors and support for it. But certainly we're committed to with our one seat, kind of supporting their efforts with the best information we can provide. So on this task force, there's seats for DNR, the Department of Ag, the state engineer has a non-voting seat, the River District has a seat, Southwest District, Northern, Southeastern, Southern U and U Mountain U trades. And then the Senate President and House Speaker will appoint a Front Range water provider, 2 representatives from statewide environmental organizations, West Lobe local government, a couple West Lobe government, local government seats, industrial water user on the West Lobe, and then 2 West Lobe ag producers, and then a rep from our agricultural organization. I'll say when the bill was initially introduced, DNR had some reservations about whether the bill was inclusive enough. The speaker or the sponsors did add seats to make sure that there was more balance between the West Lobe and East Lobe. The recommendations that will be come out of this report that will come, I think, in December of this year will be decided by a 51% majority vote. We were a little nervous about that because we definitely prefer more of a consensus-based approach, but hopefully, the speaker and the Senate President really will get some good folks on, some good collaborators on this task force, so that so I guess we're just hoping folks will strive for consensus. And again, they'll produce recommendations. We also hope that they will draw from the volumes of work that this body, the Interbasin Compact Committee, has done on demand management. I'll say before I came to the state, I served on one of the demand management work groups in 2019 and 2020, and that's when I met Amy. She facilitated our work group along with Amy Moyer, who was with the state then, and now actually had my job then, and so that's so I know that there's some really great work that I hope that they're willing to work off of. The bill also stands up a sub-task force, a tribal sub-task force, so that they can make sure they're really able to inform any future legislation. And so that folks can really understand some of the tribal issues as they relate to some kind of potential demand management program. I think it might be worthwhile for us to maybe discuss this a little bit or see if there's questions. I don't want to go on any further unless Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of hear everyone's thoughts on this as well. But not only this bill, but all the other bills too that Kelly mentioned. And many of you have participated in the legislative process, but sometimes you get a bill and it's introduced, and then how do I describe it? It gets a haircut along the way with various different amendments and so forth. And sometimes what you see at the end of the day is kind of like way different than where it started. And that's just part of the process, right? And so we, as the DNR, just like some of the organizations that you may represent here sitting around the table, have lobbyists, and you weigh into legislator with your legislative thoughts to legislators, and just like what we may do as well. And I've always thought, when you introduce bills, it's a starting point, not an ending point. And just thinking, Terry, of your ideas, moving forward, like those are great things that we should talk about, or if legislators want to discuss the next steps, like, how do you get as much information on the front end that can help inform a possible bill, and knowing that there's amendments and there's stakeholders and people. It just changes dramatically. So with that, with the task force, we're, the DNR just has one seat at the table, and so there's a lot of different organizations that don't have a seat at the table. So we're grateful we do have a seat at the table, but we don't play any significant more role than anyone else really on the table. So it's not our staff that's facilitating. It's not. I haven't decided who will be the representative for the DNR yet, but try to figure that out. Obviously before the first meeting, but let's just open up and see if there's any questions.
And just maybe just have one more thing, and that's that we've heard a lot from the legislators, like, we need to do something. And I think things were moving so quickly on Colorado River issues at the time. I mean, honestly, the Colorado's been knocking out of the park. And Amy's gonna talk about that here in a moment. And Becky, of course, has been representing us so well that I think we're a little caught off guard, like, well, we're doing so much. And we realized like things were just moving so fast. Maybe we can do a better job of making sure we're keeping our legislator partners in the loop more. So that was a lesson learned for us, I think. But yeah, please.
Well, so can you talk a little bit about what's informing the selection process? And when the selection of the actual task force members will be, set, because I mean, it's June. If there's a report that's due, in 5.5 months, that seems like, I mean, talk about moving fast. So can we talk a little bit about that? So Dan, you set up for DNR, you'll pick the representative for front range water providers, that, we're just gonna rock, paper, scissors, or will it be, I mean, because there's so many to choose from, right? And not just organizations and providers, of course, but actual people.
I think for us, it's kind of interesting because a lot of times, CWCD and our agencies, we're the facilitator and the manager of these processes. We're passengers, right, on this one. And so that's going to be up to the speaker, and it's going to be up to the Senate president and how they want to do that. I think that if you or your organization is interested in filling one of those seats, you should reach out to the speaker, or depending upon who, they each have different appointments they get to make. I reach out to them directly. I don't think they're doing an application process.
Yeah, that's right. There's no formal application process. I've been CC'd on a couple different emails on like, hey, FYI, we're gonna select this person for this entity. And I'm trying to think, but I think the speaker is really interested in hearing from folks too. I'm like, hey, this person would be good, or we probably, but if there's like a seat for, I'm trying to think of all the different seats, but for the DNR, for example, it's kind of like, hey, I'm gonna decide who has a seat at the table. It's a little bit clearer cut.
In the districts, their boards get to decide, but for the other open seats, it's kind of, it'll be the decision of the speaker in the Senate. As well.
And no specific timeline that
Well, I think they're gonna kick off their work in July 1st, so they should need to make a decision for June 30th, I believe, if I remember correctly. So you could phone calls now.
I'm still not sure I understand exactly what the impetus was. I mean, was there a failing of this current process that's being used, or could you fill that in a little bit about why this new task force needed to be in place, and why, of course, everybody at this table goes, why was the IBCC a little more involved?
I think it's tough for us to speak for.
Yeah, I know you're trying to be polite and correct, but
I think we heard what they want to do something, right? They want to do something. Obviously Colorado River is big in the news. And so there was, prior to this task force bill, there were some different versions of bills, and we at CWCB had been exploring some potential legislative options, but realized that there just wasn't enough consensus or buy-in. It just wasn't right. And maybe the timing wasn't right either, given where we're at with the negotiations, interstate negotiations. I don't want to get ahead of what Amy will speak about here in a moment, but So we backed off of that, and there was definitely some pressure, I think there was so much momentum. The legislature to do something, more than this, and the task force, I think, was the compromise. And you think that's,
Yeah, it's accurate.
yeah,
I guess my couple of points relating to this are, I think it'll be very important for, even if there's a 51-49 vote for kind of the, I'm not gonna call it the dissenting opinion, but for the alternate opinion to really be captured, because since these are recommendations, I think they're going to be as much value in, so the dissenting opinion is the majority opinion. And then the other thing that I think we're gonna need to be really mindful of is how we craft the recommendations or whatever comes out of here, or even capture the discussions, because I wouldn't want us to be handing a playbook to the lower basin, or, exposing any strategies or even any infighting between the states.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge.
that was definitely a big concern of ours, is we absolutely have to stand united as a state. And with our fellow upper basin states right now, and that's been working for us. And so there was some concern that all of a sudden we could be reversing course, all this great work that we've done through, 1177 roundtables, IBCC, like we're all coming together and working together, and we don't want to lose that. And so lesson learned of this, I think for all of us is, that is fragile but valuable. So let's really protect that kind of collaboration that we have across the divide. And yeah, sure.
Was there ever any consideration of using the IBCC for this task force?
There were a number of, there was quite a bit of testimony on that.
Yeah, there was testimony on that. Folks made recommendations behind the scenes and in committees and so forth.
A lot.
Great, Phil, I think you mentioned that as well in your testimony. So, it's a legislative process, so a lot of people weigh in, and sometimes legislators will say, hey, I like that idea, sometimes they don't, and you just never know exactly how it turns out.
Well, I echo what Kelly's saying. You've got a great process here with the roundtable, the IBCC and so forth. We don't want to lose that momentum. It's taken many years to try to get that. I can remember when Basin roundtables first started in 1177, it was going through all the deliberations, the testimony and everything, but even against forming it. And the way it was before is that water people never talked to each other, except in court, you filed an application. And I think that's the greatest thing that came out of the roundtable process, is that we're talking to each other.
I was raised by the Basin Roundtable. and watched me grow up at the Roundtable, right? When I first got on the Boyd Green Basin Roundtable, and I learned a ton of that. And I mean, look at me now. I'm in a good place. You're like, you never know. But I know y'all create a monster.
Yeah, I do think that I understand the concern that we might send a mixed message or somehow dilute our position in these negotiations. But, I think Colorado clearly is way ahead of the curve compared to all the other states. I mean, perhaps California has more attorneys involved, but other than that, as far as the internal structure within the state, they have a grassroots support. It is nowhere near what we have in place through the 1177. So I think that is a strength in our negotiations, not necessarily a liability. And to be able to engage the state as a whole and listen to the collective wisdom that we have is actually one of our strengths, not necessarily liabilities.
Yeah, I agree. And not only IBCC, but like the work that we've done collectively to even have really tough discussions, framework, version, I think there's a long list of items, Colorado River Proper Agreement, I remember signing that, but there's a lot of great examples of how we as a state has come together to historically opposing sides to find what's best for Colorado. And I'm optimistic, you know, that there'll be the right people around the room, for this task force, and I do, who mentioned maybe Lisa, like, you know, it's a short time frame for sure, so just recognizing a short time frame that gives me a pause a little bit, but anyways. optimistic.
I was really frustrated by this legislation. In part because it just seemed like there was a presumption built in that didn't really seem to be stated well as to what the problem was. You know, sort of the motivating problem that the legislation was designed to respond to. You could easily spend 5.5 months just talking about trying to define what the problem is, or if there even is a problem right now. You know, we'll probably talk about that soon. And then the way the solution was so narrowly kind of preordained, it really didn't give this task force a lot of space to consider different ways of looking at what might be a problem and then solutions for it. And so I think Kelly mentioned this already, but it's really, really important that either the DNR rep or somehow we coordinate to bring that volume of material to this task force. All the work that was done in the past with the technical work groups and the great, there's that great table, has all the bullet points kind of major issues in each area. I forget, there were 7 or 8 different areas of inquiry. And I think it's really important to list all the contributors, because that speaks volumes in some ways, maybe more than the actual bullet points. Is who already worked on this for years. I mean, it's like a who's who, right? And that should be front and center, I think, to help whoever is on the task force really understand that it's not like you hear people talk about the CWCB in our pause that we took on the demand management discussion, and I've heard it construed almost as if we just ran out of gas, or we're lazy, or you know, more interested in other flashier ideas or whatever. And I think when you look at that volume of work, it's pretty damn obvious that, you know, we didn't just take a surface look at this thing. And again, I think those names are should mean something to everybody on that task force. If they don't, I think we got another problem too. But just would really encourage that should be an opening document. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel. Here's, you can build from this if you want to, or learn from it.
I know when I showed up for the work group I was on, the demand management work group I was on the first day, I showed up. I got to sit between Patty Wells, not to be confused with Pat Wells. Yeah, she's been counsel for Denver Water, Bar Pigs. Alex Davis was across the room. We had Sonny Chavez. I was just like, I just sat down and I was like, did you guys send the invite to the wrong person? Like, I was just in this room of heavy hitters, and you're absolutely right. It was the who's who of water, and that worked on that.
Building on the comments made earlier about the IBCC's role, and I could be wrong, but I think the IBCC has written a letter or report to whoever's in the legislative leadership on a semi-regular basis, and it maybe we haven't done that in a while, or I'm not remembering it, right? And I think it's sort of like, hey, you created us, so here's what we've been doing, and maybe we haven't done that in a while, and now there's new legislators, so it's possible they don't even know the IBCC exists, or the work groups or anything. And so maybe one of the takeaways is that ought to be something we consider, is whether we're doing our part to help educate. And my other comment is, you know, especially when Andy's on trial, I'm curious. I'm curious what the River District thinks of the task force. I'm happy to speak about it.
And then you're okay.
I'll sit in Stan's seat more comfortable. I don't know Stan's on one, sorry. Yeah, I'm Peter Fleming, I'm general counsel for the Colorado River District. For those that are online and weren't able to hear at the beginning of today's session, Andy is in jury duty, I think. He may also be en route to Boulder, if I should just say, by now, he's been excused or exonerated. Sean, thank you for asking. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, very understandably so, about the task force bill. And a lot of that arose from the way it came about. The River District was not a proponent of the legislative concepts that I think resulted in the eventual creation, compromise, haircut, as Dan said, but that resulted in the task force bill. We did end up being a proponent of or supporter of the task force bill as a compromise for the two legislative concepts that were being discussed contemporaneously. Both of those concepts involve the contemplation of buying water rights, very likely West Slope water rights, located within the River District's boundaries or Southwestern. I can't speak for Southwestern. And so, of course, we were very interested in both of those bills, or both of those legislative concepts. It never got introduced as bills. We were very concerned about some components of that, just any concept of you know, the acquisition of West Slope water rights was something we felt was very near and dear to the role and the hearts of the Colorado River District. So that's why we got involved in the legislative process and the you know, the competing bills, and then it came about that you know, something needed to happen, as I think Kelly said. You know, there's legislation, you know, when it goes to the General Assembly, you know, they have their own ideas about what's going to happen. Something was going to happen, and we thought and agreed with some folks that had suggested, well, maybe this gets sort of punted off to a task force. And in my mind, at least, task force is really, you know, just a forum to talk about the things that were discussed. I don't know how the makeup of the task force was really decided. I know that the legislators thought it was very important that there be you know, that they have a role in designating folks, and I think that's why you see that there's a long list, and I'm with Dan, I can't remember exactly who appoints who. Obviously, the River District does get a seat. I hope that it's not me. I don't think it will be, because I'm going to recommend somebody else, but to our board. But because I had the pleasure of sitting on the anti-speculation task force, and that was a lot of fun, but didn't end up with any recommendations. And speaking of which, I think Pat asked about maybe the way of saying this, a minority report or something. I think that's built into this bill. I think that is required. Well, it doesn't say minority report, but it says concepts that were considered by the task force but not adopted in a recommendation. So I think I think that's actually a good thing, and I think hopefully that you know, that fully airs that. You know, and they spent some talk about, you know, is this some sort of power grab? You know, the River District doesn't
think that it has a role or the authority to, you know, for example, negotiate an agreement with the state of Utah or something like that. That's not what, you know, that's not the struggle that was happening here. The struggle was, you know, similar to concepts that folks in the Republican and the Rio Grande Basin have had to deal with, where, you know, they're facing crises and they've got to manage demands. And one of the ways they do that is by buying land and buying water rights and retiring them. When we see that coming, we think, you know, hey, those guys have a role, the Republican and the Rio Grande districts. There ought to be a role for the River District. I believe Southwestern, again, I can't speak for Southwestern. I think Steve is on the line. But, you know, we feel the same way. And so, you know, that was some of the tension and the cause for our interest in this process. I don't think that's probably top long enough, but I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any critique that anybody has about these things that, you know, I think Kelly might have hinted at it, that, you know, the last part of the legislative session was a long and tiring and at times very tense process, as these things can be. And I for one, you know, I hope that the task force does a good job. I hope it has a good discussion. I'm very concerned and very wary and aware of the concerns that were expressed about, you know, airing our dirty laundry, so to speak, before the lower basin. We don't have any intent to do that at all. But I do think that in order to get to good compromises, you know, I've spent a decade plus negotiating the Colorado River Agreement, the Windy Gap Farming Project agreement. You know, I've been through the ringer on a lot of this stuff. Pretty aged, actually, but not embarrassing. You do have to get down to the, you know, the actual substance to get to agreement on a lot of these things. And if it doesn't happen in the task force, my hope is at least that the task force paves the way for further discussion in a way that everybody can support. That's my personal opinion. Any questions for Peter? Follow?
Is anybody online? You should probably check in.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
I asked him to raise their hand.
Okay, yeah, if you have any questions or comments online, just, you know, anytime during the meeting, just raise your hand.
Sean, just maybe a logistical follow-up. Building a bit on tipping Colorado's hand and the makeup of the group in the legislative process, is it gonna be an open meeting?
Yeah.
And zoomed out to the world, recorded, make up the whole shoot match?
I would hope they have to follow the
Open meetings.
open meeting.
Interesting. So we can all go.
You know, all that.
We can.
Right, I know we're so short on time, but can I just add one more thing? And that's it. Remember, we also have a legislator rep on the IBCC. And the Senate Ag Chair gets to either be it, right, or appoint that rep. And so I think speaking about how just the legislators, I think, felt little like, oh, we want to be more involved, we want to do more, perhaps like really helping to work with Senator Roberts to make sure that we get a legislator here participating in IBCC can be really helpful.
Is there anybody named right now?
I think Carrie John.
Yeah, historically, it's the chair, right? Either the House or Senate. Yeah, sure.
Was there somebody, I think, Harry or Ken said that they had considered the IBCC for doing more? Is there any indication why they chose to go in a different direction?
I don't know that. I don't know if there's any response in the committee hearings. I don't think there really was, but Greg, you referenced that. A few other people referenced it as well. Ken?
I think we could, they have a number of meetings. I can't remember how many. There's more than a dozen, I believe. We could offer to be a guest at one of those meetings and offer our input. I mean, they don't have to do it, but at least they know that we're paying attention.
Yeah, it'd be great if folks could show up or participate virtually. Maybe Terry and Lisa.
I should say later.
Or Lisa. First.
Yes, Joe.
Well, I didn't want to lose sight, and I know that we're a little pressed on time, but I didn't want to lose sight of what Sean had.
Right.
Because I really do think that we have not followed up on that, and I think that we have to.
Yeah, right, and that's what I was gonna say too. I think we need to follow up on Sean saying, maybe we need to do a formal. Report to the legislature.
I think it may have been 2021 the last time there was a report, or I remember it was.
No.
So there's been a report that's been submitted every year, it's then submits one,
Yeah.
it's submitting one, but it's pretty, it's just sort of overview of what we've done in the year, so it could get more specific.
It's usually offered by staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm recalling like a letter from,
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah,
to
just.
sort of a staff report.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
we could
maybe
explore-
specifically for this subject.
What we could explore in the future too, that like when I was a legislator, they used to have these joint ag committee meetings that was. Early in the morning, you know, like before the legislative session really started. And that was always a great opportunity to educate both the House and Senate, Republican, Democrat, you know, all the folks around those committees, and. We focused on everything. I remember like you'd have like the DNR director with the US Forest Service regional director, the state forester to kind of give a state of forest. There were water leaders that came in. But maybe Kelly, we can explore, you know, having a briefing. And we all show up and we can educate folks, because honestly, there's so many new legislators, like, especially this year.
Yeah.
Out of 100 legislators, I believe there was over. Looking at Kelly, over 35 or 30, I don't know, there's a ton of new legislators and. And frankly, if you're not on the ag committee, you may not be aware at all of what the Interbasin Compact Committee is or the charge. And even if you're on the committee, you're getting up to speed on so many different issues with agriculture, water, forest health, like all these topics that go before that committee. So I think that'd be a good idea, Lisa.
Well, I just wanted to say, we did do the Water 101
Yeah.
series, which I think we got really positive feedback on from both Water Congress and from Water Education Colorado. But maybe Peter or Kelly, maybe you can just, doesn't the bill say that is there one meeting where public input would be taken? I thought I recalled there was some discussion on there'd be a more active dialogue meeting, but maybe I was in an earlier bill or I dreamed it.
I can't recall, I know that all the meetings are to be public, right? But as a general rule for boards and commissions, if it has something to do with the state of Colorado, public comment is required every meeting. So that's like best management practices, like for the DNR, it doesn't matter if it's oil and gas or Parks and Wildlife or CBCD, there's always opportunities for people to weigh in.
And usually the task force, like it gets delegated to an agency. I think this one's probably a little unique in that the legislators, but you know, the speaker is in charge of taking a chair and a facilitator. So we'll support as much as they ask us to.
Yeah, so we as the DNR are, you know, can weigh in and make recommendations just like every one of you around the room, and we don't have any on paper any more weight than anyone else. And so, but if there's folks you think would be really good, have a seat around the table, like definitely let the legislators know. And
I assume it's appropriate for us as we're at water meetings, as we're in these forums, that whatever our role is in those forums, whether it's a tour or whatever, to introduce yourself as where you work. And I am also an IBCC governor's appointee or an IBCC, Yampa White Green rep, and continue to reinforce that as this is another role we serve, to at least generate questions or to keep the IBCC in the minds of people. Do we need to be maybe doing that more in our?
yes, most definitely.
We have.
No, it's true, and I think, looking at Greg, your comments and like, hey, would this be better for IBCC, like. This is a great forum to have these discussions, of course, already exists, but, it's a legislative process, so, it is what it is, and I do think we do have an opportunity to let folks know good work we do, that we can be an important forum on these topics. And actually, before we get away from this, I know someone's very busy, but I want to introduce you all to the president of Colorado Mountain College. We're part of the CMC system, and a buddy of mine. Yeah, Dr. Terry Hauser of Colorado Mountain College, a great champion of water issues, longtime member of American Rivers, was board, recently floated the Dolores just last weekend, but chair of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission.
4 weeks.
This is the Interbasin Compact Committee. Here, you want to say it? Welcome us a little bit.
Just welcome to Mortgage Commons. I think a lot of you have met here before. This is why we did this space. So I'm glad. It's always nice to see that you're using it and get a text that you all are next door. So our former board of trustees member Ken Brenner was part of helping us make sure that we have this space for all of you and nonprofits to use, and nice to know that it's getting that. So, and if it's about water, you get pretty personal. I gotta go back to work, but it's nice to see all of you. I might pop over in a little bit to say hi more informally. Yeah. Okay.
Anything else on this topic? Because we do want to take a quick break, and we have a hard stop at 12:30. This room will be used, so. Lisa, any other comments? Any other comment? Okay. More to come on this, and can we just take like a 5-minute break? Is that cool? And we come back with Amy? Is that enough time? Okay, let's come back. We're back, and next up, we have Amy Ostick, who will give us a Colorado River update. Amy?
Thank you, Dan. I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna try to keep this as quick as possible. But again, my name is Amy Ostick. I'm the chief of the Interstate Federal Water Information Section at CWCB, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about Colorado River issues. Becky wanted me to send her regrets. She's actually speaking at the Getch's conference today, so she couldn't be here, but I'm happy to be here in her place. So I figure out where to check that. There we go. So I'm going to talk through a few things today. First, the Interbasin 5-point plan and progress we've made in implementing that, and then all the basin state discussions have been ongoing that I'm sure you've read about in the news. And finally, just some next steps and kind of overarching priorities and things that we're keeping in mind as we go forward. So, I guess as a kind of a segue into this part of the discussion, something I think we've heard a few times throughout the legislative session was, well, we need to do something on the Colorado River. We must do something. And I am here to hopefully tell you what the state team has been doing, and it's been quite a lot. So first, the Interbasin State 5-point plan, just a reminder that this was adopted nearly a year ago now in response to the Bureau of Reclamation's call to conserve 2 to 4 million acre-feet of water in the Colorado River system, and that's the whole Colorado River system, not just the Interbasin. But the Interbasin states, even though we use less than half of what the lower basin states use, we're getting you guys to see that. We wanted to be part of the solution, and we wanted to show the Bureau of Reclamation and the lower basin states that we have the tools in place and the will to manage ourselves, and that we know how to do that. So I'm going to do a slightly deeper dive on system conservation pilot program now that that's actually up and running, but wanted to note a few things on the other components of the Interbasin 5-point plan First, the 2023 Drought Response Operations Plan. As a reminder, this is part of the 2019 BCP. And the DROA essentially calls for the upper basin states to look at potential reservoir releases when Lake Powell hits critical elevations. So the reservoirs that are covered by that are Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, and Navajo reservoirs. We have sent to date 624,000 acre feet of water down from our reservoirs to protect Lake Powell. So again, when you get the question, what are you doing on the Colorado River? What is the upper basin doing to protect the critical infrastructure? That's a good place to start. 624,000 acre feet of water. When you think about that in relation to the 3.5 million acre feet of water we used in 2021, that's a lot of water. So the silver lining, I guess, the good thing is that 2023 obviously has been a very good snowpack year. And the DROA was meant to be responsive to hydrology. So it wasn't meant to be a plan where we just send water downstream no matter what. When we have good years, we should recover. And that's exactly what the 2023 plan is focused on. It was adopted, I think it was May 17th by the UCRC. And it's exclusively focused on recovering Blue Mesa Reservoir and Flaming Gorge for the releases they've made. Another thing kindly to highlight is demand management.
Sorry, the 600,000, that's just this year.
So 624,000 includes 36,000 acre feet that came from Blue Mesa in 2021 as part of that imminent need release. The remainder came from Flaming Gorge, and I think 450 some of that came from the 2022 plan, and the rest of that from Flaming Gorge came from the 2021 imminent need release.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we have, I did just want to highlight, Michelle Garrison did a really great presentation at our last board meeting that has a lot of tables of all this information that I didn't want to bring today, but if you want the information, it's available. We're happy to send the slides if you need it for Lindsay. No. I won't post to you. So the other thing I want to highlight is the demand management feasibility investigation, and I'm happy that Director Felt kind of clarified a little bit this idea that the board has paused on demand management. And as someone who works very closely with the other upper basin states, and this is an upper basin wide investigation, it's not just Colorado. We all have to go together if we're going to do it. I just wanted to emphasize that the reason we are where we are on demand management is because Colorado got so far out ahead of the other upper basin states. Yeah. So the demand management storage agreement says that all 4 upper basin states have to agree on some key components before we can move the program forward. Like, how do we account for this water? Once it's in Powell, how do we look at, which state gets credit for what, things like that. So we have to reach agreement on that. And Colorado has 2.5 years of work under our belt. The IBCC contributed a lot to that. We have a 250-page, sorry about that, report summarizing the work that's been done. Tons and tons of stakeholder water user input. The entire investigation was shaped by that. So I think our board kind of realized, hey, we know how to do this in Colorado from a technical standpoint, from a mechanic standpoint. We know how to conserve water. We know how to move water. We understand all of that. And now we need to hear how the other states would do the same thing. And whether we'd be able to reach agreement on those key components in the storage agreement. So we are engaged in discussions with the other upper basin state technical folks about all of that. And our plan at this point is to, since the task force will be meeting, UCRC will be discussing it, and we've now done a cycle of system conservation pilot program to learn from. We will be talking to our board again about the demand management feasibility investigation and reminding our new board members and bringing everyone up to speed about all the work that's been done to date. I think Director Paul also mentioned it was the executive summary, I think, of the 250-page report that just outlines, some key findings from each of the work groups that were formed. And I think one important thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of parts to that investigation, right? There are the technical components of how do we move water, how do we account for it, all of that. But the decision-making roadmap the board adopted calls for a couple other very important discussions. like advisability. So even if we know we can do this, is it the right tool at the right time? Does it fit in with everything else going on an interstate level on the Colorado River? And I think those are some really critical questions to think about, especially as we've learned, for better or worse, everything we've learned about the Colorado River system and how it's operating in the last few years since this all started. So those are some of the big questions I anticipate our board and a lot of other people, I'm sure, thinking about in the near future. So the other thing I will just highlight, oops, I always get impatient with these things. So as I said, the demand management feasibility investigation is a 4-state effort. So we have our own investigation, but the UCRC also released a report that is available on their website, kind of summarizing some of the key findings from an interstate level, some of those technical issues. But again, there's that big question of, you know, even if we can do it, is this the right time to do it? So I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about the system conservation pilot program. As a reminder, you know, this is similar in nature to demand management in that it's different in that it's an actual program where demand management has not been stood up or still in the feasibility investigation. But the concept of both of them is temporary voluntary compensated reductions in consumptive use. So paying water users to not use their water for a temporary period of time. Okay, jumped ahead. I can't tell if I'm controlling this or not.
Maybe you just want me to do it?
Yeah, thank you.
You want to go back?
Yeah, I can do a back one. So this was again part of the 5-point plan, spanning the entire upper basin. And I don't know if you all were at the drought summit last week, but I'm reminded of something Chuck Holmes said about any upper basin conservation efforts. I think he used the word small, messy, and painful. And that has been our experience with FCPP. It is a lot of work for a relatively small amount of water. And that story is most true in Colorado, where we had the most number of projects and the smallest number of conserved consumptive use. And that's just kind of indicative of the fact that we had a lot of really small projects participate. So we are now, that kicked off in December is when we got the federal authorization to do it, which put us on a really, really, really tight time frame with the irrigation season starting in March. But we did what we could. And we're learning a lot of lessons every single day about how we could do it better next time if there is a next time. So this is a summary of where the projects are, how much water has been conserved south of 40,000 acre feet. And I will say, we're still finalizing contracts for a lot of these projects. So some of these have dropped out. So this is not actually, I don't think it will be the final number. I think it'll even be lower than this in terms of the projects and the conserved consumptive use. So, yeah, go ahead.
And just a quick question, I thought this was a 2-year program, it's just a single year for right now?
Well, so the federal reauthorization, I guess maybe just to back up, we need a few things to make it work. One is federal reauthorization. We have that through fall of 2024. The other is the will to do it. CRC.
Yeah.
And at the time that we moved forward with this year's program, it was set to be a 1-year program, and we could kind of assess from there and see where we were. So we have the ability to do it for another year.
UCRC.
The UCRC. We're suffering from some PTSD at the moment. But that being said, I think that will be a discussion in the very near term is whether we do it again for another year. We only have authorization for 1 more year. Would you have a question?
You mentioned many lessons learned. What's the top one that comes to mind?
Oh my gosh. We need more time. I think that's the first thing, and that's something that we've really impressed upon Chuck at the UCRC. And the other thing I heard at the drought summit was Chuck doing a little bit of a mea culpa that, yeah, we were trying to move really fast. And part of that is beyond his control, beyond any of our control. We got the federal authorization in December. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't put out an RFP until December. So that put us in a really tricky situation to figure this all out. So I
Yeah,
contract, right? It's funny because so when the program was previously operational 2015 to 2018. And I was in the AG's office at that time, and I was doing I was kind of, cutting my teeth on doing contracting work for this, and wow, yeah, it was a lot of work.
The application stuff. So, Amy,
Yeah, but
how are you guys maintaining the story of return flow? When you dry up and fallow?
so all of the proposals get a review by the state engineer's office to ensure no injury. So that's kind of the check we have to make sure that.
But how are you doing? You gotta have a lot of storage.
Honestly, I think that we are looking, and I think the state engineer's office is looking at these proposals through the lens of how can we avoid those types of issues? And I think most of the projects are small enough in scale that hopefully.
Depends on the line.
Yeah, so I know the answer to that. I don't know if Kevin heard me.
Yeah, sorry. Could you ask the question again?
Kevin, I was wondering on these conservation, this conservation program on this fallowing of this land and so forth, how are we maintaining historic return flows?
How did we ensure that they're maintaining return flows? Terry, is that what you said?
That is correct.
Yeah, and so I think what's important is that we did not, for proper reason, we did not look at this as a typical change of water right, even though it has that appearance to us in Colorado. And so, this is really just a decision not a decision, but an action whereby the water was just not diverted. It was not called or it was bypassed. And so there's no maintenance of return flows component that was necessary. It's just that the water was not diverted for that consumptive use. And I don't want to be too mysterious about that. Does that make sense, Terry? Because I can maybe explain it better.
I understand what you said.
Okay,
Thanks, Kevin.
sure.
Amy,
Yeah, go
just the second part of it, I think, Kevin, is that those diversions, those water rights were protected.
Right.
So they're not actually getting a zero for that year. They're just, that year's not being considered in a future quantification.
And that was the next point I was gonna make, as far as historic consumptive use, change cases and things like that. Our board in March did approve the program as a state approved conservation program so that it won't count against anyone.
To pull that thread a little further, and then it's protected all the way out of Colorado.
Well, it's with respect to historic consumptive use and a state change case or for abandonment purposes. So that.
Yeah, I understood that, but the effective, hey, this isn't gonna be consumed, where is it going? Just the next person downstream?
Well,
Okay.
that's another big.
Sorry, let's learn.
I mean, that's a big difference between demand management and SCPP. That's the critical difference, is that if a demand management program were stood up, that water would be shepherded to Lake Health. This water became system water, so it was not shepherded to the state line. The only legal mechanism we have to do that, to store water in Lake Powell, to protect it from balancing, to shepherd it would be through a demand management agreement, feasibility finding.
We're 2 years ahead of that.
Expiring.
Yeah.
That's another good point. Demand management storage agreement expires at the end of 2025. It's accurate. So to close out system conservation pilot program, a lot of what we're learning here will inform the demand management feasibility investigation. Certainly. And we will be looking at the whole thing through that lens and also considering whether it makes sense to do it for another year. And we recognize that if that's going to happen, that decision needs to be made very soon, very quickly. Yeah, so I think I'll leave system conservation pilot program for now. But that discussion will Certainly, oh, I forgot, I'm not complaining, but I look super on it. That discussion will continue. So as all this is going on, since we've been implementing the 5-point plan, a lot of other things have been going on. In November 2022, as you all know, Reclamation announced this notice of intent for supplemental environmental impact statement on the 07 guidelines. And the intention there is to essentially amend the 07 guidelines so that there's greater flexibility to adjust operations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The scope of that is limited to Glen Canyon Dam and below. In January 2023, I think the last time I spoke at IBCC, this had just happened. The six of the 7 basin states reached consensus on what we were considering an alternative for reclamation to model as part of this process. California was the state that was not a party to that. In April, Reclamation released the draft SEIS. And then very recent news is that the lower basin states just a couple weeks ago announced a proposal to conserve water that they would like for Reclamation to model as part of the supplemental EIS process. So I'm going to break all that down a little bit more. As you all may recall, Colorado joined 5 other states, again excluding California, in urging Reclamation to model an approach that we liked. The approach called for, first of all, in the upper basin, we wanted them to recognize that our water users face hydrologic shortages all the time. Our water users are already very short on supply, which has resulted in us using, in many cases, less than half of our compact apportionment. So we don't have a lot more to give in this process or anywhere else. And we have been beating that drum every chance we get, including in the 6-state letter. So that was a critical part for us, and that anything else that we're going to give would have to be done on a purely voluntary basis, like, for example, the System Conservation Pilot Program. We also urged Reclamation to essentially high level just reduce uses in the lower basin, reduce deliveries to lower basin states. And there are a few different mechanisms for doing that, including assessment of evaporation transit losses. Because again, as Becky and Jeff both pointed out at Drought Summit, physics, works in the lower basin as well. Evaporation happens, and they should be accounting for that, just like we are in the upper basin. But also additional lower basin shortages at various need elevations. So this is what six states could agree to. When the draft SEIS did come out, oh, sorry. So the draft SEIS, when it came out, we were very pleased to see that there were 2 action alternatives. Neither of them called for any action by the upper division states, which we thought was a huge win. They both called for reductions in use in the lower basin states, and they just differed in terms of how those would be apportioned. So in one alternative, California would be taking a lot of the hits, and the other, it would be shared more equally between Arizona and California and Nevada. That happened, and then we were getting towards the end of the comment period, which was set to expire on May 30th. And we had a very, very, very long weekend of calls and discussions because the lower basin states came to us and said, hey, we have a better proposal that we would like to put forward as part of this process. We received a 1.5 pages of bullet points from the lower basin states, essentially saying, look, we're going to conserve 3 million acre feet of water, and we're going to front load that, so 1.5 million acre feet would occur in 2024. And we said, that sounds like a great plan, give us the details, tell us how this would actually work, who's going to take the cuts, how are you going to ensure this actually happens, what is the enforcement mechanism, and by the way, if you don't do this, what will happen? And they couldn't provide that to us in the course of 3 days when they wanted our agreement on it. So we said, sorry, we can't agree to that. I think as Becky said at the summit, I will not put Colorado's flag on our letter saying nothing. But what we did commit to is, Reclamation can model this, get more information from the lower basin states, maybe talk a little bit about what backstops there might be if it doesn't happen. And we'd like to see the actual modeling of that. So show us what it looks like, show us your work, and we will wait to take any position until you do that. That might not line up with what you've heard in the news. It's really frustrating after working that entire weekend and being on these conversations to see a New York Times headline say the Basin states have reached a historic agreement on the Colorado River. That's not actually what has happened. But like I said, we did agree that, you know, they should take a look at this. Reclamation should model it, and we will reserve any judgment until we see that. So that's what recently has happened. Lower basin states are looking for $1.2 billion to compensate this conservation. Some open questions that we have again are, you know, who's actually conserving the water? How is it measured? How is it accounted for? You know, as you all probably know, the lower basin has this nifty tool that came out of the 07 guidelines in BCP called intentionally created surplus, where they can store water in Lake Mead and take it out at a later time. So we're really curious too about how that previously banked water that they have sitting in Lake Mead might interact with this, if they're looking to be able to get that water out at a later date, for example, if they're conserving more. So those are the kinds of things that I don't know the answers to right now, and we're waiting to hear on. So that's that. You know, the silver lining of all of this that I just want to re-emphasize is that in the lower basin proposal, in the draft SEIS we saw, in the 6-state consensus-based modeling approach, no asks of the upper basin. So we have not been asked to cut our uses. We have not been asked to do anything beyond voluntary measures and continuing to live within the means of the river, which is what we're doing. So we consider that a win, and we consider that the direct result of Becky at every opportunity telling Colorado's story. And you all have helped inform that and helped, you know, let people know that, look, we have lived within the means of the river. We are well below our compact apportionment. We shouldn't be punished for that. You need to look downstream at the states that are using 10 million acre feet of water a year, millions of acre feet more than their apportionment for the solution. And it appears as though they've heard us. So we still have a lot of open questions, but I think that we are in a pretty good position, you know, to tie this back also to the new FTE we're getting into the kind of expanded work we've been able to do. I'm really proud to say that we now internally have a team of people who can model what's happening at Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which is very, very complicated. I don't understand it. I'm glad I have staff who do. But that has given us the ability to say, wait, you know, we need to look under the rug a little bit more of that. We need to understand how you're actually doing this because it affects us too. So I'm hoping that the new positions will really help even build that up even more for the really big negotiations that we have coming up. And speaking of, I think someone said California might have more attorneys. The AG's office is also expanding their team. So we might never have as many attorneys as California, but we are stacking up all over the place so that we're really prepared for whatever may come.
Jeff Myers has a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Hi, Amy, it's Jeff. I hope you can hear me okay.
Here, loud and clear.
So I know that you've done the math on the lower basin states proposal, but if you think about it, they're actually shifting to water year 2024 1.5 million. It's really 3 million acre feet in the next 4 years, which comes down to about 750,000 acre feet per year. And that, based on what they're using, is actually only about an 8% reduction. It's not even really 10%. So that the two action alternatives in the SEIS, if I remember the numbers, were like 13 to 28%. And their proposal is more like an 8% reduction, for which they are asking to be paid $1.2 billion in taxpayer money. Is that about it?
Yeah, well, yes, I think it's a little bit more complicated The way that the two alternatives would perform in the draft SEIS would depend partly on hydrology. So, we can make some assumptions and look at maybe it's a 13% cut, but we don't know for sure because we don't know what elevations Lake Mead will be at. So we can't say with certainty how much the lower basin states would end up taking, because a lot of that is based again on elevations at Lake Mead. So the lower basin states, the way that, if they were in the room, I think what they would say is, look, we did the math on that. We did our own modeling on the two alternatives and believe that we would end up conserving roughly 3 million acre feet of water. Based on the hydrologies we think will happen. Go ahead.
So Amy, are they saying we're gonna take 3 million less than what we could take in the future? And we don't know what they could take, so we don't want it.
Also accurate, yes. There are a lot of unknowns here. There are inherent unknowns because of hydrology, and looking even at the draft supplemental environmental impact statement, knowing how that would perform would depend on how things play out at the reservoirs. And also how this would perform. We can't model it yet because we don't, like I was saying, we don't know exactly how those cuts would be achieved, how they relate to ICS, how they relate to other mechanisms that the lower basin states are using. For example, that 500 plus thing that never quite materialized. So that's all to say, there are a lot of unknowns at play here. We're going to do our best to understand them once we have more information about this proposal. Yeah.
Amy, I'm interested in your feelings. Whoever it is that came up with this 1.5 million and 3 million numbers, this EIS, I've done a few impact statements myself. I'm talking about this. Do you feel that these people are talking out their butt, just pick figures somewhere and decide to throw them out this way? Do you think they really know that they could do something like this? And what's your personal feeling about that? I know it's kind of hard to put you on the spot, but I feel that these people pulled these numbers out of their butt. They got no facts behind it. They got nothing to prove it. All they said, oh, we can do this. I've seen this too many times in places. And I think you're trying to say it politely about it, but what I feel is what's your feeling on it? Can they really do 3 million gallons? Or is it just a figure that they're trying to get a $1.2 billion with?
Oh, gosh. I would say two things. One is that there's a long history of interstate comity and collaboration on the Colorado River, and we've done a lot of things by standing together. And also, we need to have a very healthy dose of skepticism about all of this, which is why we wouldn't take a position on the page and a half of bullet points that we received.
Who did that EIS?
The federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation did.
Ah, okay.
Well, the draft SEIS that was separate from this proposal.
Right.
And that would have called for very specific cuts to very specific water users, which is not exactly how this.
Did their proposal people read the EIS first?
They did. They didn't like the SEIS, and that's why they did this. Well, we'd rather keep it our way and get paid $1.2 billion today. But the other thing I'd really like to emphasize, again, there are a lot of open questions here, a lot of things we'd like to understand better, but we believe we have to start shifting to post-2026 negotiations now. So, the guidelines that govern Lake Powell, Lake Mead, what this is all supplementing, that all expires at the end of 2025. So, we need to start focusing on what comes next and looking at how we can better manage the reservoir so we don't end up here again. And in our mind, a lot of that comes down to, the simple mass balance problem at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. We can't be sending more water out of the reservoirs than what's going in. It's very straightforward in our minds. And we wouldn't be in this situation we are in today if the lower basin states had been living within the means of the river, just like we do every year. So we have a very simple ask, which is, let's get through all this, let's do our best. And then let's make some hard decisions and figure out how to get depletions in line with supply. And we do that in the Upper Basin. In 2021, we used 1 million acre feet less than we did in 2020 because the water wasn't available. So we are simply asking that our lower basin counterparts do the same thing and only use what the river provides. And having the 2 largest storage buckets in the nation right above their uses has given them the ability to run them into the mud. And
Those storage buckets don't really affect us. We can't get water out of those. Once we send it to them, it's gone.
That's exactly right. Which, again, there's a silver lining to that, which is we have learned how to live within the available supply here. So that actually brings me to my next point, Viola. move us forward. I think because the reservoirs are where they are, because we are, the Colorado River system, and specifically Lake Powell and Mead are in a state of crisis, we are getting tons of questions about, we need to do something about this, right? We need to be proactive, and I don't disagree with that. But there are also a lot of concerns coming up about the compact. I think anytime that you're in a tricky situation, you get concerned about litigation, you get concerned about, are we fulfilling our obligations? And I want to be very, very clear that we are well within compliance with the compact. We have never been in violation of it, and we are not in danger of being in violation of the compact. Our 10-year number, so to speak, is around 8.8 million acre feet relative to our 88, relative to our 75 million acre foot requirement. And the other thing I want to emphasize about that requirement is it's a non-depletion obligation. It's not a delivery obligation. So even if
also at one point, we are the handle on the faucet. I mean, the hand that turns the faucet. It's our water. And we made this compact to give it to them, but if push comes to shove, we can threaten that, I believe. I mean, we can turn the handle on that faucet and shut it off. There's nothing they can do about it.
manages Glen Canyon Dam, but the point I want to make is that we feel very confident in our legal positions. Because even if we were getting close to that 75 million acre feet over a 10-year period, we're using half of our compact apportionment up here. We did not cause the flow of the river to be depleted in that way. So we, again, there's no escaping the fact that there's a lot of conflict on the Colorado River right now. There's a lot of potential for conflict. There are a lot of words being thrown around. There's a lot of rhetoric. But we feel good about where we are. And we feel that we have a strong and growing team in place should we need it to defend ourselves. So I just kind of wanted to make that point because I do feel like there's a lot of talk about the compact right now. I think a lot of misunderstandings, and I just want to be clear about what the state position is on that. The other thing about the compact to keep in mind is the whole idea was equity between the upper and lower basins, and they should share in the river. That doesn't mean that we have the amount available that the original drafters thought we would have. We don't. What it does mean is that we should do a better job of sharing what is available than has been done to date. And that's another thing that we're looking at as we look forward to negotiating the post-2026 reservoir operations, is how can we make sure the lower basin states are feeling the pain that our water users feel every day. So I guess that brings me to what's actually on the slide, which is, I guess the other point I'll make is that, Peter referenced the Republican and Rio compacts and the positions that were on there. And I just want to make clear that that's not where we are at the Colorado River. We are in a proactive stance. Anything we do, whether through demand management or any other conservation type program, is proactive. We're not doing that because we have an obligation that we need to be responsive to. We're doing it to be resilient and to give ourselves a buffer if we determine that that's the right approach at this time. Okay, back to the slide. What we can expect in the immediate future is, so like I said, reclamation is now going to take that proposal that the lower basin states put out. Hopefully we'll be getting more information in the lower basin about what it actually looks like. Reclamation will model that as part of a new draft SEIS that you can expect to see a revised version coming soon. Maybe you'll still see one or two of the alternatives, the actual alternatives that we had in the previous one, and you can see how the proposal performs alongside that. That is our hope. But again, we really believe that we need to start looking forward to post-2026 negotiations and just get ready to make some different decisions this time around. Now that we've learned how those 7 guidelines operate, they were always meant to be and are designed to be interim in nature so that we could learn from how they operate. So we have the ability to do that now. And I do just want to emphasize again, there's a lot going on the Colorado River, and I think it's very important that to the extent we can stand together as a state and speak with a unified voice. And I think that the progress we've made on the Colorado River is largely due to our ability to do that state. So next slide, please. We the thing I guess I'll end on is we've really been upping our engagement, our communications, our outreach. We have an engaged CWCB page that is specifically focused on Colorado River issues. We have a commissioner's corner. Where we have updates on interstate Colorado River issues, and we're going to be trying really hard to get out and about to the roundtables. Anyone else who wants to hear us talk about this. So be on the lookout for more information coming about kind of all the things that we'll be working on. And you can use that cute little QR code, get more information, but we'll be pushing more out soon. I think that's all I have.
Chambers had a question in the chat earlier. It was about Sean Cronin's question regarding administration of conserved water. Will the SBPP lessons learned be documented in a UCRC or CWCB report that can be used to guide continuous improvement?
Yeah, I think we can expect to see a UCRC. I don't know exactly what form it'll take, report or something like that. I'll also note that if you go to the UCRC's website now, there's actually a kind of lessons learned report from the last time we did this, from 2015 to 2018. So it might be something similar to that. It's interesting looking back at that and seeing how much things have changed since we did it last time on multiple levels. Some things have changed and some things remain the same, but that's all to say, yes, there will be documentation of that.
Other questions?
Yeah, during comment, I think that's a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments online? Or virtual? Okay. Yeah, Ken?
Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you so much for the update. And this is such a refreshing change from the 2007 guidelines. Have been much more transparent. Thank you. I completely agree with the focus on the long-term solution. That is the crux of what we are dealing with. And I'm sure we'll look back in a few years and realize how much time we wasted on some of these system conservation programs, et cetera. But, you know, being able to accurately measure what we have to share and buy is, to me, is a way to get us focused on the future and stop this alternative proposal that we're seeing. And then finally, I think the system conservation program and dominion management really send a mixed message. You have been very consistently lived within our means. There's a certain amount of water that's what we get to use. But if you send us money, we'll send you water. So those are my comments. Thank you.
You know, and if I can just respond a little bit, I totally hear you, and that's why I wanted to emphasize, you know, Colorado contributed 3,500 acre feet. We're doing what we can, but it's very limited because our water usage are already very cut back. And so it is a mixed message, but I think that SCP and looking at what we can do, especially during this critical time, has shown the federal government, has shown our partners downstream that we're serious about this, that we are doing what we can. You know, and I would like to think that that has something to do with the fact that they didn't look upstream at all. You know, and whether that comes through SCP or what it is, showing that we are actively engaged, showing that we're at the table, though small, messy, and painful, sometimes can have its benefit.
I just want to echo Ken's comments too. Thank you, and Becky and the whole team for really working so hard on this. It's a lot of moving targets, I would say, and I think I thought it was pretty interesting. I got off the river and it was kind of like you see in the news that, oh, there's a 7-state agreement. Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of this information up there.
It's so funny, Dan and Chuck are both on their phones right up until we get in the boats, and then the second we get off the boat, they're on their phones and they all look like a dog died.
But I just want to say, if you ever are wondering if what you're reading is true, if you go to the next slide, you can email me. I mean, seriously, I want to make clear that we are always available. You know, if you have a question about, you know, what you're reading or what's happening or not happening, reach out.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think, you know, you and Becky will be kind of a standing invitation for all of our meetings. This is important for everyone to hear updates and have this dialogue as well. Awesome. Thank you. Next Next up, we have Peppo updates with Lisa and Ken.
Separated this, so I don't know how to do it.
I did check, actually did the press respond.
Well, so why don't I just give, I realize we're a little time constrained, so I'll just do a really quick Peppo update. Is that all right, Ken?
Of course.
So the Peppo meetings have continued. The Drought Summit, I think, was a wonderful event. I thought that we heard some really positive feedback. So, you know, the Peppo meetings have been really focused on collaboration. It's been great, and I think that the program's getting stronger. We did get 8 out of 9 Peppo coordinator submissions in, and Carrie, I'll visit with you about Peppo and how we can start getting you involved too. And then we got 4 grant applications submittals for the statewide, which was translation, videos about Colorado Scape or Sarascape, local messaging, I believe, and then one thing that we'll talk about a little bit more when we do our basin report outs, there was a submission for a statewide survey that on landscape which we're hoping will actually support, came from the Metro Roundtable, and we're hoping to support the Urban Landscape Task Force. So that's the Peppo update. And then you can see the C9 Summit planning is on. And Ken, do you want to take this or is Russ?
Yes. I can jump in if that's all right.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you all. You know, we've been talking about the next C9 Summit. It's our opportunity, we view at CWCB, to really kind of bring roundtables, IBCC, and the board together to create greater collaboration and alignment, which is something I think IBCC has really been on the forefront of. In fact, a lot of the survey work that we've done over the years has really tried to engage roundtable members. And sometimes I think there are other roundtable members that want to, you know, be a part of the IBCC discussion. So this is a way just to bring everybody together. The last C9 Summit, I think we planned it about 6 months out, certainly in earnest, you know, 3 months before. So now is a really good planning time for us. And as you all know, we asked you and roundtables for some feedback. So I wanted to kind of just touch on a lot of that. We also asked them what type of presentations they might want. And it was interesting, I thought, because we talked a lot about the need for having workshops and, you know, more time to talk. And I think that still ranks as pretty important for people. But I did think it was interesting in the results that kind of in order of what people wanted or liked most at conferences, presentations from experts like the one you just heard, or panel discussions were 1 and 2, and then followed by workshops and networking events. So I'll just add that in addition to kind of and I'll break down kind of some of the survey results here in a second. You know, I think we learned some lessons from the last C9 Summit about some of the things that people liked there, what worked well. And we know that we have time in a full day for about 8 to 10 sessions. And some of that, of course, fluctuates depending on when we start, the time we build in for workshopping, networking, et cetera. So if you click the next slide, Jeff, or Viola. Thank you. So here are the results. And we tried to just kind of highlight by votes what got the most attention. And then I went back and looked at some of our past survey work with the IBCC and the roundtables, and Jeff helped me kind of tease out how to maybe best show this. So we just kind of highlighted the top 4 things that seem to have alignment in past surveys, but obviously wanting updates and information on Colorado River discussions. Drought resilience, I think is such a broad bucket. We could probably house many of these other conversations, even if they're not explicitly touched on in there. For example, drought resilience pertaining to what? You know, water conservation in municipalities, agriculture, ENR, what does drought resilience look like? Could maybe take the form of a larger panel that talks about all those things. Climate change, we just at the Drought Summit, a really great presentation from some work that CWCB has been funding to update the climate change in Colorado report. That will be certainly completed by the C9 Summit, and maybe a good piece to refresh this group on, for example. And then some of these others start to get a little bit closer in numbers together, but water conservation is something that came up last time with this group. It ranked pretty high this time as well, but then also watershed health. And then you'll see there's obviously some other things that kind of fall out on the back end, but funding is another one that ranks pretty high. So in lieu of that, and just to take a stab at what a draft agenda might look like of the types of topics we cover, go ahead and click that next slide. This is what I think there's some feedback, sorry. This is what I think, just in combination with some of the other discussions that we've had, might kind of start to constitute a bit of an agenda. We've talked a lot with you all, and Peppo begun drafting, honestly, largely based on the CWCB board's handbook, a bit of a larger roundtable handbook. I'm not so sure that that's not really a board IBCC and roundtable handbook, but we'd like to have maybe a draft of that we could kind of circulate, if not before, at least at the C9 summit. And I kind of see this as just the go-to for answers on just kind of what are the rules. We just get 1,000 questions, it seems like, and have over the last few years, you know, of things you heard about today, like what does complying with open meetings law mean? You know, are we subject to core requests, things like that. So I think this would kind of be broad strokes of what each group does, and maybe some of the rules behind it, not meant to it be in lieu of or replace any local roundtable handbooks, but more just when you join a roundtable, where do you go to get the facts? And a lot of times it just goes to the first conversation you had, and that maybe is or isn't accurate depending. So we figured we'd do that. We've talked with you all about that. We'd like to make that a part of the C9 summit. Ken and Lisa have been really great, and Ken particularly talking about how can we be more you know, effective and cognizant of using Peppo, and maybe a workshop at the summit was something that Ken suggested. So I think that we could do something around that. There'd be a lot of interest, especially as it pertains to regional collaboration. As I think about things like just even the forest health white paper that we all worked on, and some subset of the roundtables, Rio, Southwest, Arkansas in particular, helped support during the BIP update. I mean, that seems like some rich space for regional collaboration, just as much as regional videos or you know, sharing materials or having some common branded Peppo materials would be. At the last C9 summit, we had an all chairs panel. I think that doing something along those lines again, it could be just the chairs, it could be a mix of IBCC, our board, and the roundtable chairs, probably a few different flavors of that. But I know something Ken was interested in is just seeing any local innovation that might have happened at roundtables in terms of how they run their meetings, how they, you know, maybe set up subcommittees or just even approve grants. So there seems like there's some rich space there that we would dig into. Then you're seeing in 4 through 8, those are the things that you have expressed and the roundtables have expressed, just wanting to hear more about. Again, some of these may combine together, or we could think about exactly what they look like. The last 2 on here, I'll just flag, because they consistently rank high in all the surveys. And I think sometimes maybe I've noted that when we say something like forest health, that tends to get more higher votes than watershed health sometimes. So I don't know if that's what's driving this or there's confusion, but that seems to be a consistently important topic that I know roundtables have expressed wanting more interest in. So I think we'd be remiss maybe to leave that off completely. And then water quality, I just wanted to tee up the Water Quality Control Commission and our board have talked about getting together at times. I don't think that probably is going to work out for this year, and it's probably something we look at next. But if water quality did rank kind of high, and at the drought summit we had a water quality, water quantity discussion that I thought was pretty rich in breadth and what we might want to dig into, and is possibly worth a placeholder here where maybe some members from Water Quality Control Commission might come. So if that all seems of interest, I guess I wanted to throw this out there just to see if any of this resonates strongly, or if there's anything people just want to add, or see if there's something you don't like seeing on here. But I'll pass it back to Ken and Lisa to facilitate that discussion.
Really quickly, thanks, Russ. That was a great summary. I was just wondering, can you go back to the results of the survey? So was there was, and yeah, somebody's gonna have to tell me, is ag?
Yeah. Yeah, so the way it kind of shook out is like those 4 that have the yellow dots and then the 5 that have the green bars are kind of the ones that rank the highest. And then there's kind of the next bucket that ranked pretty high up there, just kind of not quite as much. You can see, I mean, pretty much most of the topics ranked pretty high.
amongst the people that participated in the survey, so. Yeah, ag and collaborative water sharing agreements rank pretty high up there, it kind of just. Fell out into the next bucket down.
I'll just think that, or add that the Drought Summit had a great panel on ag. And there was a lot of talk about ag efficiency, so that might be one thing that we can kind of consider. In addition, but what Ken and I were talking about was just getting everybody's feedback about how the agenda looked and whether or not you found that that was generally what you'd like to see happen.
Yeah, as far as like, what is our mission as an IBCC? In a lot of ways, we sort of serve as a bridge or a conduit between the roundtables of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. It seemed incumbent upon us to try to facilitate better communication and coordination between those. So we thought this might be something that we could try to reintroduce and maybe even on an annual basis as a major way of sharing those informations and learning from each other in an environment that has structure to it, but still is interactive enough. The biggest concern I have looking at this is it's like 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. We might need to do a little bit more the previous day, but we would really appreciate, all of us that have worked on this, Jeff and Russ and Lisa and I, it would be like a quick roundtable and just get at least a couple of comments from everybody about what you see. Does this have value from your perspective? How would you do it different, or is there something we've forgotten, or does this look like something that you want to try to support?
And also to the new members, if you have any questions about even what it was.
Yeah.
When we held it before, let us know.
I don't know if Viola's control this, can we go back to the agenda? If that next slide, talking about is that the proposed agenda? Okay.
Just an outline. Yeah, outline.
But we're really gonna have to formalize the agenda fairly quickly, so staff can start lining up appropriate speakers and topics and start pushing out the information for folks to generate some interest.
But we really want to hear back from you guys. We really need to hear them.
Yeah, on the number 2 in the regional collaboration, I think, and we're gonna talk about this next, but I think there'd be great value too of like information sharing on great projects that have gotten off the ground and lessons learned and how everyone can learn from that. And maybe our next discussion, maybe there'll be some projects that kind of bubble up that are like, hey, that'd be a great one that we should share. But I think that's worthwhile.
I guess I would like to emphasize the conversation I think we've been having all morning about this is IBCC's chance to really kind of market itself, reinvigorate, re-energize what we're here for, what we're all about, and maybe actually putting IBCC out front a little bit more in one of the panels of let's look back at what we've been accomplishing or where we're going or the conversations we're having would be one way, and then another way might be and I can line up with kind of where Director Gibbs wants to go with the conversations later today, but actually have some IBCC members really step forward and talk about how they've been championing projects and really be almost spokespeople or even facilitators for here's some of the great projects that we're doing, and here's been the IBCC's role in adding visibility, bringing resources to the table, creating conversations that make these happen. Just a few thoughts.
Great idea.
Come on, Terry, you got it.
Roundtable.
If there are more topics, it didn't look to me like there was much of a difference. And a few votes, we're not talking hundreds of people. I wonder about getting more topics in and just splitting up so that you go through 2 of the topics at the same time and then you choose.
Think of the concurrent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also some possibility to, group some topics together, like drought resilience and climate change or water conservation and efficiency and things like that too. So we can certainly play around with that a little bit to see if we can get some more topics in there.
If you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to send that out, I'd like to share it with the roundtable and get some feedback.
Thank you.
So based on a comment of 10 pounds and 5-pound bag, you know, thinking about the day and there really are a room full of subject experts for the most part, and there will be I don't know, a little more emboldened expert on a stage talking to experts about the things that the experts already know about. So I guess it might be worth a challenge of how to sort of challenge the presenters to present the information in a way that engages the experts, and we don't look at our phones and we don't go into the hallway and you know, TED Talk-esque things come to mind of, hey, you've heard this before, but I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. Might be an interesting way to approach it, or you know, videos, or you know, I know the phone polling seems to get people excited once in a while, but some way of engaging with the audience and not having it, I'm talking to you and hope you have some good discussions, but maybe some engagement back and forth. And I know that's hard, and I know that's hard for a whole day, and I know that's hard for certain presenters, but that would be my 2 cents, is just, you know, the topics we have weeks of topics. That's sort of the easy part. It's coming up with how does it roll out and engage folks. Thank you.
Because and maybe we're, you know, as the group talked about breakouts and like smaller table discussions versus just presenting, and I kind of would go towards Sean's, if we have a spokesperson or someone from IBCC working on this project and people who want to engage and learn from each other. But it's a lot of logistics, right? And a lot of people. So that's just one thought. I know in previous summits, we would have, you know, smaller group discussions that may or may not work with what we're doing, but I just throw that out as a possibility to weave in.
I like the innovation of like trying to create a different presentation. That's a great idea. And then for those of you, sorry, Brad.
I was just gonna say that, I don't know, maybe like at Water Congress, sort of events like that, sometimes they have someone come speak who isn't talking about water, you know, but it's sort of more about a different way of thinking about how we do stuff. Yeah, I can't really think of a great example right now, but those are often, despite my lack of memory, those are often memorable. And they kind of take you out of what Sean was talking about, getting a little bogged down with experts, talking experts, whatever, but just like, start thinking about this way, or here's a different way of collaborating, a different way of interacting. I don't know, I always welcome one of those, you know, it's just gives us all a little bit of a different lens to look through.
I think a lot of good conversation was sparked out of the trust panel in the drought summit. So if there was a way to do something like that, that's just like Rick said.
Yeah, that must caught me, like brought tears.
Yeah.
Very, very touching.
So I think we've all had teachers that were great and teachers that weren't. And if you think about it, what makes a great teacher? One that gets you involved in it, that maybe has a little bit of showmanship. Think about Mr. Wizard on TV, something like that. I mean, you got to get your audience interested first before you can teach them anything. And so I think I was at the drought summit, some other places, and it gets a little boring after a while. You just facts and figures and no really relationship to it. Now, if you open up with like a little fireworks show or something, and then say, oh, now look, I got your attention, now look at this. But I think a lot of it has to do with trying to get people's attention in these days, which when you got these and that and everything else getting attention, it's tough to get them to pay attention to a person.
That's because. Oh, he's So for those of you who attended the last summit, you might recall the day before, there were some events that we had. There was like a fly fishing, there was a mountain biking, there was
Dinner.
a beer drinking.
Yeah, beer
It was really focused on water.
I'm a big fan of this.
Water in the summer there.
Day before, I think we can do stuff.
It was the day before, but I thought that that was a real opportunity for people to get to know one another. And was a lot of fun, but it's also for staff. I think it's a lot to try to organize the logistics of getting everybody where they need to be. But would folks find that again, a positive?
I volunteer Greg to lead the fly fishing trip with Paul.
Where are we? In Denver, in November.
Oh, it's in Denver too.
The last fly fishing, because I was on the fishing one with David Nickham and Paul Brochet, and we went to the fly fishing dads, because everybody had it. Yeah, that was it, yeah.
Everybody's taping their ears now.
We could have a board meeting the day before out on the ski hill in Summit County.
Well, so
Well, the location of that final actually, yeah, right?
Correct.
So we can think about that.
Yeah, it's not finalized, but it is in conjunction with the November CWCB board meeting, and that is. I don't know if there's an actual location finalized, but it is in the metro area.
I guess we met at the same time, we're in conjunction with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, we invited the task force, we were over there.
Yeah.
So I think there is a meeting that was tentatively scheduled in October, so we do need to decide what we do with that opportunity. Or if the summit would, suck on the team that place that.
I was gonna bring that up at the end to see if folks were open to that idea, maybe instead of having our next IBCC meeting in October, that's all the C9 component. Just a month later.
Start with beginning of the first day with some of those meetings and then move into the C9. Yeah.
Could I need
Just to
to
try to be more
post a
efficient.
reception or something, and everybody's
Get us all together.
Yeah.
legislators?
Yeah.
Legislators. Good idea. Legislature involved.
So if staff could help us get maybe the tentative agenda out, we can get some feedback, but thank you so much for your input.
If there was a desire to have something a little more untraditional, sort of networking, get out there, and that involves work and who's gonna do that, and if you dare suggest that maybe you become communal chair. Maybe Bond might be looking for something to do, and they could be a group to do all that.
And they have so much energy.
I think that's great.
You're old. All right, so that's awesome.
Yeah, we do all meet in our own little area.
Well, this is super important. Thanks so much. Any other comments? I just want to try to.
We haven't everybody
Online, any comments? Or questions?
Is no, there's is Viola gone? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, with Jeff's.
Yeah. It looks like they were just wondering where that's gonna be, so, at least in the chat.
To be determined, I think.
If it's Denver, we could go to Avalanche.
We could raise nuggets, man.
Nuggets.
We could all on the floor or something.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's very exciting and welcome. Appreciate your leadership.
The opportunity.
Okay, next up, want to transition to you all to give us updates. It's been about a year or so that I try to challenge you all to champion a project or two in your basin, and really want to hear from you on what projects you're championing, but also, hear what you're working on too. And, through a lens too, I want to know, if possible, what helped make that project work, or what made the project successful? What are the lessons learned from the project process? What are the key challenges and barriers to advancing this project? If there are any key partners in the project, who they were and what did they do? And also what funding stream was used in the project. And so we'd love to kind of hear from you all on this. And if there's not something that you've been working on in particular, but want to also give an update on what's going on in your basin, or if you're a governor appointee, also kind of what you're working on as well, and what could be relevant, we're happy to hear from everyone. But I'd love to focus first on who's in the room here, and then we'll move to who's online. Does that sound good? And we could just kind of go around the room, or I'm also happy just to kind of have folks raise their hand if anyone's, prepared. Yeah, Jerry, okay, let's just do it that way. Jerry.
Start, but I want to speak more generally.
Yeah.
What we do, what I've noticed is I think we have a great needs assessment process that we established years ago, and it's been very successful. One of the things I see on projects that are successful are those that really do good planning ahead of time, and we know where they're going. And they're close to an implementation. I'm not talking about a study, but they're close to an implementation of an actual on the ground type of project. And they've got it, they really got it down. They got their scope of work well identified. And they're able to, once they contract, they're able to go through all the tasks within the scope and make it work. One of the most difficult things I find is that sometimes when you're trying to plan and get all the pieces in place and get the funding there at the same time, it's kind of difficult to at times. One project I'm thinking of is an alluvial storage project that the Upper Ark has done and was doing. And we had some grant funds through Water Supply Reserve account. There's about $100,000 left to expend on it. And we had a lot of difficulty in putting together pieces that need to take place. And all the agreements we need in order to move forward with all those tasks. And I think it underscores what I was talking about, is that you need to make sure you have all this planned out way ahead. Some of the other projects that we've been doing, and they're spread across water plan grants, folks asking for support letters, and Water Supply Reserve account. But Salida has a low-head dam, Parks and Wildlife, but they're applying for water plan and grant money now, and they've got things pretty well lined up. It looks like that's going to go forward. That's moving on. Going to move forward to CWC being for approval. And then Little Town of Beulah, this just recently, they need a raw water storage tank. Quite expensive for them. There's no place where they can do above ground storage in that little basin. And so we're trying to help little towns like that. And also big projects like CDW project. Upper Ark, for my district, we have quite a few projects. We actually have 3 of them that have, or 4 of them, I guess, that have grant funding. They're moving forward. One is kind of a unique one. It's an inner ditch to provide water in a tributary that has a lot of restricted capacity. We're able to work with company and change that water, change it within the ditch, and put it at the head gate of a ditch within a tributary from the main stem of the Arkansas River by augmenting the well and then delivering the water in exchange for the other water. That's moving forward. Then we also have, I mentioned the alluvial storage project. And we have a couple other ones that we're working on. We're upgrading all of our gauging stations. We have about a dozen of those on reservoirs and on streams. And we're updating all of the DCPs to the latest technology. And throughout the basin, there's a lot of, there are some separations that are moving forward. We're also doing a pilot, not a pilot, but it's actually a project The Van Norman project, I've spoken about that before at different locations, and hopefully that will give us an idea of how maybe we can do some stream restoration projects. Move forward. Anyway, that's what's going on there. So.
Great, thank you. Jairus, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm not sure all that Terry said because I'm having some audio issues, but just to go back to Dan's charge a year ago, and that was to select a project and push it. The ARC Roundtable selected the Arkansas River Conduit Project, which will provide water to 44 communities in the lower Arkansas Basin. And we're pleased to say that about, I guess, a month ago, we finally broke ground after that being authorized in 1967. And we'll be starting laying pipe shortly as we connect water in Pueblo Reservoir to those communities downstream. The other issue that I think is important, or I feel is important to our basin, our Ark River Watershed Collaborative is very active, and I was hoping to get a short spot on this agenda to have them make a brief presentation. I think what they're doing would be of great interest to all of the basins. They're looking at nearly $3 million in grants to do watershed restoration projects in the Ark. And I think that's pretty admirable. So that's all I have.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. They're big deal projects. At least, so thank you. I don't know if we want to just go around the room or anyone that's ready to give updates next. Excellent.
So I'll let Lisa talk mostly about this, because she's been more involved recently in it, but the landscape transformation was kind of the one that we really were targeting in the metro. And then when the governor created the task force, we didn't want to duplicate efforts, so we broke some things out and we just talk about where we're at in that process.
I think we're doing a better job communicating the funding that's available. We're getting a lot more applications. I think in our last round, we supported Bosley Farms, which is an infrastructure project, Open Water, which is the data gathering. We supported Greg Peterson and Kawa, the ag programs. So I think we're doing a good job trying to get that money distributed well. But our real focus on the metro, as Rick was talking about, was we had surveyed the group and we had picked 3 projects that we thought that the roundtable was interested in pushing out rather than waiting for things to come in. We would create scopes and push this out as a priority for perhaps a shared Metro South Platte project with the 2 groups, the 2 grants needs group. And that's what Rick was talking about. The one that we thought was going to be the one that was going to be first through the gate, trying out this process of being able to push it out, be fully transparent, trying to generate interest. The urban landscape task force sort of kind of pulled that rug out. And so the scoping committee decided to withdraw. But then those of us who were on the urban landscape task force realized that there was an element of that scope that was actually really, really pertinent and relevant to what the task force was doing, which was a statewide survey. So the scoping group, because of this process that we had set up, the scoping group was able to reconvene. They pulled a survey out. We pushed it out. We coordinated with staff, which was great. Everybody was super helpful. And so that was one of the statewide initiatives that actually did get applied was for the survey that will support, and it's to get people's feedback on values about what people feel like about landscapes, what you don't want to see, or turf, what you do want to see, pollinators, trees, you don't want to see those gone. And so we thought that the task force would find that information really critical. So you start to see how some of these processes are actually starting to work. So that's great. Yep. Governor's still.
And you have the results, the survey?
No, so this is just getting applied for. So what we're hoping is that the survey will inform the later work of the task force.
Yeah.
Statewide pepper guns.
Thank you. Others? Yeah, Joanne?
Gunnison Basin, when their top EIP goal is to not to keep aging infrastructure functional. And they, in the last couple of years, have been able to work with and use the WSRF funding to go ahead and instead of having to cut the dams to replace the pipes that are now over 100 years old, we're now slip lining the pipes, and we can do 3 or 4 or 5 for what it costs to open one. And so we've been successful at doing, I think, a half a dozen between Grand Mesa and Little Creek. That's, I mean, there's, talk about the word on the funding getting out. We spent almost the entire last roundtable going through 8 applications. And supported all of them to some degree or another, and I'll be wanting to see that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I can go. So for the South Platte, the kind of a shift in thinking around WSRF funds is historically not been terribly interested in funding deferred maintenance for particularly ditch companies. That was reconsidered a few months back, and the roundtable is now open to funding deferred maintenance and quite a few projects coming through. Also at the South Platte level, it should come as no surprise, storage is constantly a subject of conversation. And I'd like to say with grant support by the roundtable, but it's the project proponents that are getting these projects to the finish line. So Northern Water, obviously, with their Chimney Hollow Reservoir project, I'll put a plug in. The tours are booked solid, as I understand it. But if you get an opportunity to go check out the construction of Chimney Hollow Reservoir, I highly recommend it. You will think you're looking at a small truck, and then you'll see a human being next to it and say, my God, I'm looking at a huge truck, because you look at everything from an overlook. It's quite an impressive construction project. And I just saw the project manager the other day at a kids baseball game, and they've lost 8 days because of the rain, is what I heard. So good, bad news on rain. The Glade Reservoir project received its record of decision, so that is in the next step of the process. Obviously, the Denver Waters Gross Reservoir project is under construction. You got the Lower Parker project that is going through its process, so quite a bit in way of storage on the South Platte. So not something I would have said when you gave the challenge earlier on. A little closer to home, I brought gifts. This is St. Brandon Left Hand Water Conservancy District. We have our version of a water plan, and as was mentioned earlier, with the state's funding, we are using our local funding, leveraging against the state's funding, and leveraging that against other federal funding. So you guys are 4x, we're like 8 or 10x by the time we wash it all up. But on the front cover there is just how we're leveraging those dollars to our local taxpayers, and little dollar bill there with percentages broken out of how we're spending that dollar on the variety of different projects. You can see it's, what we used to call legs of the stool, but all the things, all the various water uses. One to kind of highlight for folks is we did invest in weather modification this year, and I'd like to say it's a coincidence that we had a ton of snow this year. I think it's because of our weather mod. We were the first front range weather modification station. I think there were front range entities who fund and support weather mod, but those stations were on the west slope, so we were on the first on the east slope, actually seeding storms that came from the east up west to the mountains. And we believe we're gonna get about a 1 to 5%, the report's still coming in, 1 to 5%, or about 1,000 acre foot of real actual water. Just as a quick aside, one of my directors said, well, that's our water and we should be able to divert that, and that's a whole other thing. But it's cool to be able to have the conversation. Dan asked for money, so the district spent $42,000, a local ditch company kicked in $5,000. The state put in about $90,000 for the equipment. There was 10 storms seeded over 182 hours of operation. So when you pencil out, if it's 1,000 acre foot or half that, when you pencil that out to the dollars invested, it's really cheap cost per acre foot water. Lessons learned, these things become sexy to the media at times. So we find ourselves on PBS and national news and local news, some of which were totally favorable. Some I lost my mind over because they couldn't actually get our name right or our people. Like they actually had Scott, one of my engineers, and they called him Paul or something. That is what you do. So lessons learned there is you have to be really slow talking with the media. My name is, that's how you spell it. I wish I was joking. Yeah. And war is half. The St. Bernard Left-Hand Water Conservancy District had, and at one time told the media guy, you know, and if you forget or you can't do it or you can't spell it or it's too long, just zoom in on my hat. And they did. They actually, like the story came out and they just zoomed in. I'm okay for that. So great partnership with the state. We're actually looking at expanding the program. Again, the report's going to come in. I think it's going to look favorable. And we're actually talking with the River District and others about, you know, you got those west slope sites, but they don't seed on storms that go west to east, all the way over. So is there a possibility we could do both and have sites on both sides? So the state's really intrigued by that as well as us locally. So a good way to, again, leverage dollars at a pretty cheap cost.
What was your method? Did you ground based or?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, it was a station. That was another lesson learned. So they're on a trailer. It looks like a tiny food truck, and it just runs off propane. And we were able to partner with a ditch company on a location by a reservoir that was actually a really good location. And then another conservancy district who owned a property and located their property. Worked out great. No real human interaction. Didn't have to worry about folks getting excited about it. The one on the ditch company, they wanted an agreement in place with the operator, who's a consultant out of Utah or Idaho. And as ditch companies do, they use the I word. We wanted full indemnification. And it was actually at a fishing and hunting club. And the contractor's like, well, you got guys with guns. Like, I'm not going to fully indemnify you if somebody shoots my trailer. And so we couldn't come to an agreement, actually. And so we ended up moving it to another local water district. Couldn't make they were really sorry or apologetic, but they said we couldn't take unnecessary risk. Anyway, another lesson learned there. And then the last thing to point out on the further of the leveraging, and I know many of you know this and are aware of the program, the NRCS PL 566 effort. So with our water plan, and you see the numbers on there, we intend to work that through over a 10-year period, and there is beyond our financial needs and really beyond the state and the other funds that we're leveraging. So we put in a $240 million ask for the $600 million that's available nationwide on PL 566, and we're working through that process now. We're actually in like step 2 of the PIFR phase. So really excited about where that's going to shake out, and hopefully be able to report back to this group that we're working through that process. I'm sorry.
Focus on what project?
So this is for our district boundaries are really the basin, and PL 566 is a quote watershed plan. So we were able to propose stream restoration, forest restoration, reservoir expansions, infrastructure additions, fish passage. I mean, all the things, which we had been keeping tally of and knowing that we couldn't fully afford. And when this PL 566 program was brought to our attention, we thought perfect. And when we met with NRCS, they said, how much do you think we need? And I said 240 million, and they said okay. So we started doing it. I should have said 3.
Well, so Sean, those requests, how does that work with some of the other planned projects in the basin? Like the,
Which request you talking about?
like your 240 million, like how would that work with like the Platte Valley Partnership, for example, on infrastructure? Like, is it infrastructure that's pointed for a particular user or for purpose, or is it multi-user?
Yeah, so for the request that St. Green Left Hand Water Conservancy District made up of 240 million, it is, we're not necessarily the project proponent or owner at the end of the day, which we got to walk through the logistics of that, but we are the NRCS calls the sponsor, so we're the local government, we could sponsor and can move through, and so one of the projects might expand a reservoir was 80% municipal and 20% ag. And we don't even have an interest in, but we as a conservancy district interested in advancing this, squeezing more water out of the system, we're really interested in seeing this project come to fruition. So at some point, we'll be sitting down and sort of working out agreements as to who gets what out of the expansion of the project. As far as the greater South Platte, I believe NRCS is still looking for sponsors to bring projects forward.
Right.
Correct. And it doesn't, we were told from the get-go that it doesn't have to be like to a 30% design sort of level. The consultants that NRCS hires are having a hard time with that, but to our local state NRCS folks' credit, they're really pushing back on that, saying there's no requirement in the program rules that it has to be that fully fleshed out. That's what you're supposed to do, consultant. The problem is they don't have a ton of money to get it to some certain stage that they could confidently determine there's the cost benefit analysis is what they're trying to accomplish. So there's some sort of give and take, and we expect that the consultants will come back probably in the next 2 or 3 months where they'll say, we just don't know enough about what you were trying to achieve with this fish passage project or the stream restoration project. We don't have details other than you want to do this. For us to analyze that, and again, I keep folks posted on what happens at that point. And then there are other projects that they simply said, we don't think it even qualifies for PL 566, which we're totally fine with if that's the conclusion.
Super interesting.
Thanks, Sean.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Other folks in the room that are ready. Yeah, Bill.
No, I suppose I'll follow up with Sean because we're kind of in the same area of him. I deal with a lot of local people. I go around and talk to farmers, and ranchers, and residents, and all the other things. And I'd like to say that some of them have guns, and I'm glad a lot of them don't know that you can see them, Sean, because they ain't happy with the amount of rain they got. And they couldn't get in the fields, they couldn't do things, they got flooded out, they had a lot of problems with the rain. Mostly because nobody expects it. But in regards to this kind of stuff, what has happened is that we have all kinds of ideas and plans on how to conserve water for this irrigation season, like we did a little bit last year. We started to irrigate 1 month ago. I irrigated one day and then it rained every day since after that. We wasted our 1 day of the water as far as my place went, but everybody was just starting to, and then the rains came and nobody needs to. So we have all this water that's been saved. We have ideas on how to conserve it. I mean, I talk to them all the time, my neighbors, about, not overflowing, watching tailwaters, just kind of local conservation type things. I came from Davis, California, many years ago. They had a drought there, and they voluntarily in that town, because they don't have individual water, it's just the whole town that's 1 meter. They cut their use by 2/3 of their water voluntarily, just doing a few simple things. So I am a great proponent of the grassroots work on this. Get out to the people out there, and as Lisa has mentioned before, and as our people in Colorado have been doing this for years. I mean, we're long-term conservators of water, but everybody can do a little bit. If everybody would conserve, like say 1 cup, you got 4 million people in Colorado, and everybody saved 1 cup of water, that's 4 million cups of water. But you only saved 1 cup. So I keep going around and trying to get the people in my area, in our South Platte Basin area there, to think about water, not just get it like, the first year I was out there, and the farmer who ran my ditch, burned everything, just ran water, didn't care if it ran everything, didn't care anything, because that's the way he's always done it. So our education from levels like organizations and stuff is one thing, but also from peer to peer. And that's what I try to do out there, and it's been somewhat successful, although I think I had a monkey wrench thrown to works this year because nobody wants to hear me talk about conserving water in a year like this. But if we'd have been a little bit more together and been able to make some ponds ahead of time, we knew this was coming, it could have saved even more. But again, this is why I'm taking a catastrophe and turning into a bit of a good luck thing, is that, hey, everybody, look at all the water we got. If you had a hole in the ground, you could save some. So maybe in the following years, we can get some more people to conserve a little bit, have a pond on their property that they can fill when we have this kind of excess, and then use it throughout the year. So that's my little contribution on things, and don't know how well it'll work right away, but hopefully down the line, it might have some beneficial use.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Bo. I appreciate it. Good work. Other updates from, yeah, Ken.
So the Ample White Green, we have a large emphasis on agriculture. And that's a very strong voice in our roundtable. So there's been quite a bit of emphasis on updating the ag infrastructure, especially now that the Yampa River is under administration. That's a major priority for the Division of Water Resources. So we've done everything we can to help with that, and we're making good progress. There's one really big project on the Maybell ditch, one of the oldest ditches on the Yampa River near Maybell, down Maybell, and that's about a $5 million project that the PNC is working with the ditch company, and they have, that's going to be a multi-benefit from the ditch infrastructure itself, as well as from it's one of the better short rapids that has a pretty easy turnaround. So it's got a real strong recreation component as well. Another really big project that's moving forward, multi-benefit, is for the town of Craig. Craig has a water diversion infrastructure that was aging, and it also it's located just at one of the few places in that area where there's actually enough of a draw to put in a recreation amenity. So they're kind of embracing a Buena Vista kind of philosophy of really beefing up a section of their river with the hopes that it'll stimulate the recreation economy as they transition away from fossil fuels. Since the river's under administration, Montgomery County has discovered that some of their land use decisions in the past have left a lot of 1,100 units without the ability to be supplied water. So we've helped them with an augmentation plan that's well underway. So that'll help take care of that issue. We're doing.
Did you say 1,100 houses?
1,100 developable units. So they're like ranchettes.
Okay. Developable future.
Exactly. And there's some of them are developed now, but now that the river's under administration, because of the issue if they're using water outside.
Yeah.
Stillwater and Sheriff Reservoir, Stillwater more ag infrastructure, Sheriff's Reservoir municipal water supply for the town of Oak Creek, both big projects, the reservoir improvements. But one of the things that we're experimenting with, you'd asked about a new thing that we're trying to do, is this project coordinator position. So we have all these recommendations that are coming out of these stream management plans. We have a list of projects that are in our basin implementation plan, but we wanted to follow up on it. You know, actually, so we just hired someone to assist in reaching out to each of these people, keeping up our spreadsheet so that we know as much detail about who the partners are, where the funding sources are, what their timeline is. And so that we actually meet tomorrow for our kickoff meeting to review the entire scope of work. He's done about a month's worth of work already to kind of get his arms around the scope of this. So we'll be reviewing that and trying to move forward with something for the rest of the year. That funding is coming from some funds that we didn't spend all of our integrated water management plan funds. So we're just following up on the implementation of these projects that have been identified. So we're pretty excited about something actually providing assistance to the proponents that are out there. So a lot of times they're smaller projects, they're not sophisticated people, they don't understand the grant funding that's available. So that's a new thing that we're trying as a project coordinator. And then Pepco purchased 2 canopies. They're really nice. They got 2 walls in them. They're full color pictures. One's a map of the region that we're in. The other one is the entire state of Colorado that has that snake diagram of the size of the river basins and how much water coming from where people said, I set it up and sat through the River Festival last weekend and people loved it. And we had a steady flow of people coming by to say hi. So those are a few of the things we're working on. And of course, Jeff will probably jump in here and talk a little bit about the effort that the Big River Committee continued. I'm sure all have heard about the position papers that we continue to draft. But we have a membership on our roundtable that really tries to follow current events and policy discussions and feel compelled at times to actually put that in writing. And these are long, arduous processes that we go through. The demand management, I think we spent 6 months on that paper. Probably spent 3 months on this last one for the River. So anyway, those are the things that we've been working.
That's great, Ken. And since you mentioned Jeff, anything you want to add?
No, not really. I know we're short on time, Dan. Thanks, though.
Okay, great, thank you. Other folks in the room? Updates, Carrie?
Yeah, I think I might be the only one left here in the room. Yeah, so I'll be quick, but we have ag as a priority in our basin as well. And a lot of our basin implementation plan has focused on irrigation infrastructure, which is kind of what we've been funding. There's been a couple of reservoirs, one that we funded earlier that's getting going, and then another one we funded more recently. Help restore those and restore some capacity. What else have we done? We chose to continue to fund the seminar project that Wendy Ryan has done. So that we can, keep getting more data on the consumptive use of our meadow grasses, and compare that to the coagment data so that we can just have better prediction, better understanding of that. We have a new kind of project that we recently contributed to. It's a lodgepole thinning project on the State Forest State Park, and for a forest health, watershed health kind of initiative. So the State Forest came to us with that, and the roundtable asked them to find some matching funds from other groups, and they did. Back and it's funded. They're going to have to continue to find more funding into the future because they want to be able to treat a lot of acres, and this is only funded, I think, like 250 acres to start with. One of the things that the roundtable was particularly interested in was that on some of these thinning sites that they chose, it should increase the snow water equivalent by up to 20% on these sites just by opening up the canopy and decreasing the transpiration. And they agreed to start the project on northern aspects just to help keep that snow in there later in the summer. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
That's awesome. And, State Forest State Park, that's geographically the largest state park in our system with over 60,000 acres. So it's a massive piece of land there that needs to be managed. So
It is, and they really they're really dedicated to trying to find the funds. I mean, it's just hard right now because of the timber market. So they're really trying to find it so that they can sell the timber in 50 years.
Greg or President? Yeah.
I'd like to go real quick. So I was fortunate to be invited to serve as a subject matter expert for the recent Growing Water Smart workshop, and was able to kind of rotate through the various communities that we're working through. They're developing their action plans, identifying their issues, and I think we should all remember that I think land use is mentioned over 80 times in the Colorado Water Plan. It's been a real focus, and it's part of the actionable goals, and really was encouraged by the great work that was done in these northern Colorado communities. So within Northern Waters District boundaries, we currently have over 80%, about 75 to 80% of our municipal allottees have gone through the Growing Water Smart training. We're hoping to get that to 100 so we can really support that Colorado water plan goal. And I guess what I saw through that process and where I think we can provide support to communities is in providing capacity to implement their action plans around land use and water use and nexus, provide funding, whether it's for additional facilitation or it's for code updates or even providing model landscape water use codes. I think that would be really important. And then the other thing that I believe I identified and others identified was this need for maybe getting some technical assistance on evaluation of water supply portfolios. A lot of these small communities have a lot of, they're trying to look at, should we be diversifying our portfolios? How should we be looking at risks, whether it's Colorado River risks or infrastructure failure risks, and providing them some technical support and advice on how to maybe do scenario planning. There was a lot of discussion about the Colorado Water Plan and the technical update and how they set up those scenarios. So I think improving that level of understanding of how that can translate to their communities would be really important. And then the last thing I guess I would mention is throughout the South Platte Basin and specifically for Northern Water, we are really looking heavily at how we can advance the conversation on conservation easements and ATMs. Our NISP project, about half of that water system deal will come through ATMs and conservation easements and such. And so I know so much of the conversation has been around the Colorado River issue, but we're looking for those to kind of hopefully reinvigorate those discussions, both with this participants and farmers and within the basin to kind of keep that water locally and keep that in basin and help make those arrangements that allow projects like this to really function long term.
Good job. In the room more Greg, and then we can maybe go with the Rio Grande's online.
Just a quick one. We obviously we've got some great funding allocations we talked about earlier coming to Arkansas, but I had an experience last week that cost nothing, but was really beneficial. Most folks know we have this flow management program in Arkansas. We augment the flows from July 1st to August 15th with mostly the dry arc water. Over the years, Public Board of Waterworks in particular has really internalized the flow program needs in their water management. And so they often have water that they need to move down, and they time that with our flow program so that they provide additional water at no cost just by timing those flows. And it's been a great thing. About 15 years ago, we had a rough situation in the spring with some water releases that screwed up some important aquatic insect hatches in the spring and just kind of messed up this whole spring fishery element. And so we had some meetings on that to really try to codify the benefits that could come from proper flow management, really reducing flows generally in the spring. And as a result of that, we started having these phone calls among many of the major players in Arkansas to try to coordinate, because we were finding that there were times when people were going to move water and raise the flows, and somebody else needed to exchange water upstream, and that would lower the flows, and we were trying to lower flows. So we were doing all these coordination calls, and it really created a lot of good communication and collaboration. And I mentioned all this because what happened last week, we were having an implementation call for the July 1st Dark to Flow program, and the rep from Aurora, who obviously they're not based in the Arkansas, but they definitely have assets and activity to do. And he asked a simple question: what's the flow at Parkdale today? Parkdale's the gauge right above the Royal Gorge, and we have a flow recommendation, a flow advisory, where you don't go into the Royal Gorge commercially to raft above a certain flow. And the gist of that question was, because of these phone calls we've been having and all this communication, people are really starting to think about this even more. And they wanted to time their exchanges, getting their water from Pueblo Reservoir to Twin Lakes and then out into the South Platte for delivery. We wanted to time those exchanges with peak flows so that to help us keep the Royal Gorge open for boating by reducing that peak flow. So it was like a third generational sort of internalization of our needs. And again, at no cost to anybody, but just the result of good communication, listening, and thinking about how they could help. So just throw that out there. It's not a big project or anything, but it's been just really heartwarming to see that kind of collaborative.
Sometimes it works.
Yeah, it can work. Oh, that's right.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Greg. Let's move to online. Let's see, how about the Rio, Carrie and Kevin? And then we'll have Southwest after.
Hey folks, hopefully you can hear me. Oh, and Carrie's on too.
Go for it, Kevin.
I think Carrie and I talked about we weren't really sure what to prepare for, both of us being new. But I just wanted to say that it's been really good to be part of this call today, this meeting today, and learn really what's going on with IBCC and around the state. And so I just appreciate you all in this discussion today, and I look forward to working with you guys in the future. As for projects, I think Carrie can help me out. We've got a lot going on in the Rio Grande. Recently, we've really done a good job leveraging this available funding to kind of some of the non-traditional roundtable partners in our basin. We've got a really cool project with Parks and Wildlife to look at study some seepage out of Beaver Creek Reservoir. And Parks and Wildlife has been a great partner to a lot of the water users in the basin. And so this project is really a reflection of all the partnerships that we have and the collaboration, and kind of looking at how we can maintain recreation and water user supply simultaneously. We're also doing a similar thing with the Forest Service, looking at water quality impacts and sustainable recreation. We have these two complementary economies, recreation and agriculture. And so we're working with the Forest Service to replace some of these vault toilets that are very, very old and leaking directly into our streams. So we are stopping the negative return flows. And we're also doing some work on our wildlife refuges with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so those are some of the recent roundtable projects. I think you guys are also aware of a lot of the forecasting work that we're involved in here in the Rio, looking at the airborne snow observations, our new radar, doing kind of everything we can to improve our forecasting and which kind of goes directly to daily administration that we live in. But I'll turn it over to Carrie. I just wanted to say thanks. It was nice to meet some of you, and certainly nice to track this conversation and learn more about IBCC.
Thanks, Kevin. I think he covered just about everything I had. The only thing I'll add is just a shout out to our education subcommittee that's been working really hard over the past year. We've had, I think we did a really good job of the Water 101 fact sheets. We had a new one every month, covered a lot of topics. And I think that was really helpful for a lot of our roundtable members to just get sort of a quick overview of some of the different projects going on, and just different perspectives on ag, municipalities, and environmental and rec. We've also been putting together a lot of tours. The most recent one was over to the Southwest to McPhee. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. Kevin got to go on that. But I think the tours have been really helpful to bring roundtable members together and highlight some of the projects that we've been doing, and then to just travel to different parts of our basin and now to other basins. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. So I guess with that, that's all I had to add to Kevin's good overview, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the IBCC.
Great, thanks, Carrie and Kevin. And again, we welcome you and look forward to working with you. Next up, we have Ken or Al for the Southwest online.
Yeah, I'll start, and well, Ken can then as you. Are you getting feedback there, or is that just...
We can hear you just fine.
Okay. I guess I'll say we took a slightly different approach to your challenge Director gives. You know, we talked about it and how we could get the roundtable to focus around one or a few projects, and given the 9 sub-basins we have and how the politics, the geography, all the legal implications of how it's different in each one, we thought we would continue to basically work together as a basin to implement the projects that were identified in the Southwest BIP. And along those lines, there's numerous stream management plans, or as we refer to it here, the Upper San Juan Integrated Water Management Plan. And there's another one in Mangos. The Animas is starting one. There's one going on in the San Miguel. But I think the accomplishments that we've done here in the Upper San Juan are a good example of how learning from what's gone on in other parts of the basin really helped us get projects implemented on the ground. Right now, we've got $1.8 million worth of essentially stream restoration, a little bit of recreational improvement in the San Juan as it goes through the town, the 3-mile stretch of the San Juan as it goes through the town of Pagosa Springs. Town refers to that, the San Juan, as their infrastructure. You know, it definitely supports our tourism industry here. But with all those differences in the 9 sub-basins, somewhat, I'll say, highlighted by the differences on the west side and the east side, that there and Ken's neck of the woods, the Key project supplies a bunch of water, depending on what year it is. Last year was pretty bad. This year it's great. But the people within Colorado, here on the other side of the basin, the people the other side of the mountain, be it the San Luis Valley, Rio Grande Valley, are all one same, but they get quite a bit of chunk of water out of there, and there's attempts to get some more. But like Carrie said, Ken invited the San Luis Valley folks and then the rest of the roundtable, and Steve Wolf and I were able to come over, and it was great interacting with the San Luis Valley folks and getting to meet Ken in his new job there. But I think the big thing I would say successful on is collaborating and promoting within the roundtable, helping each other out as far as whether it's writing a grant for projects that have been identified, or just additional funding that might be available. And like Carrie was saying there, over in Ken's neck of the woods, there's the Airborne Snow Observatory is going gangbusters over there, and lots of new projects. The Dolores Conservation Area, we did a lot of weather mod this year. But I guess as far as the other things that were met, as far as meeting multiple goals, was provided the roundtable provided some funding for a water treatment plant here in Pagosa. And one other thing we'd like to highlight is the work of the outreach, which I guess we could say is more of a regional approach. Have the 9 basins bulletin that is put out periodically, trying to get that out a little more regularly. But earlier in May, Elaine Schick organized the Children's Water Festival, and it brought in 700 kids from throughout the basin to learn all sorts of things about water. I mean, it was a great thing. I was there, and it was really impressive to see how much the kids knew about this. I think that collaboration throughout the basin, helping each other and not necessarily being opposed to each other, I think is our key to success. So Ken, or for that matter, Melly, I don't know if you have anything else to add in there. That's all I have.
Yes, if you can hear me. Real quick, the only thing I'd add is, no, we haven't coalesced around any basin-wide projects, but just looking at the 6 that we've awarded this year, they are spread throughout the smaller drainages, and they've recently been focused on agricultural delivery improvements. There have been some gates and canals and piping, along with ASO support for the Dolores district for forecasting. And finally, there have been several non-consumptive projects led by MSI for monitoring throughout the basin, mostly relative to river health and often connected to the forest health. So we don't have any problem getting applicants, and we are sending the funds out for multiple uses. And taking a historical look back, we've had a lot of funds sent in for municipal supply development. And historically in the Southwest, with the lack of groundwater, those municipal supplies have sought to spread out to meet everybody's drinking water needs. And we've ended up with water docks at all our communities because there are still a lot of people hauling water. With that, it was great to have the San Luis Valley or the Rio Grande Roundtable join us, and rafting will be wrapping up this weekend, it looks like, so hurry down.
Great. Thanks, Ken. I think we covered all the basins, so I want to thank everyone for really, looking up at the screen here and in front of your computer, if you have it open, answering the call. And, a better way to put that maybe is, are we meeting this moment in time? When we look at the infrastructure bill that passed, the IRA bill, we've talked about this before, that this is really, I would say, a once in a lifetime opportunity that we're seeing these great funding opportunities come our way. So I want to thank you all for taking this charge seriously, for working with your basins, for working with all different partners. When I think about the long list of items, Arkansas River Conduit Project, the 3 projects, the scoping work within the survey to really get a good understanding of what is going on, aging infrastructure, expanding reservoirs, improving storage areas, recreational component, ag infrastructure, land use issues, checking off the list of your basin implementation plans that you're working, water smart workshops, forest health issues, just to name a few. These are all big and challenging topics, and guess what they all have in common? They all take a lot of collaboration to get things done. We're the IBCC, we're the group that's working together to look for these common themes that we want to look through a lens that is important for Colorado to move forward on these common themes. I just really appreciate your leadership today in stepping up big time in your community. You're selected either because the governor thinks highly of you enough that you're a water leader, or that your basins look at you as a water leader in your area to represent you here around this table or online. So thank you for taking this charge very seriously. And there's so much work that needs to be done, obviously, in the future. But just as we wrap up, again, I want to thank, Viola, Jeff, Kat, Kelly, our whole team, Amy, Lisa, Ken, thank you for those updates on PEPO. That's really awesome work. Thank you for the C9 summit that's right around the corner. I know you'll gather more input and we'll make this really something amazing. I'm very, very confident of that. So with that, is there anything else? I know we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock for this room. But I know there's lunches outside that you can grab.
And you can hang out in that area. There's seating, and that's perfectly fine if you guys want to hang around and eat here or take it to go. And have some more drinks I'm gonna grab too.
Great. Awesome. I've shared this map with the governor at my cabinet meeting on Monday, and it reflects. I know most people aren't thinking about snowpack numbers right now, but I live in Summit County, and when I look up at the mountain, I'm like, I could still ski those runs. I think about snowpack, but it's pretty extraordinary to also have a snapshot of look and see how slowly in certain parts of the state, the snow melt is occurring, and Gunnison's at 460% of average, and Colorado River Basin's at 214%. So this gives us, a little bit of breathing room. But I don't want us to pat ourselves in the back too much, because who knows what next year looks like, who knows what the following year looks like, so we need to continue to act with urgency. And we need to continue to work in collaboration, and that's what this body is all about, having these tough discussions. Working around the table, understanding where everyone's at around the table, and finding these common sense solutions in many ways that we can bring forward. So I felt like this meeting was very productive. Personally, I feel like it was one of our best since I've been in this current role. Because we know a lot of the topics we've discussed is hard, whether it's like drought task force or Colorado River issues or just legislation as well, just it's tough, But I just want to thank you so much for your commitment for being involved. With that, Pat, is there anything I missed?
No, I think you covered it up.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, everyone. Safe travels for those that drove here, and thanks again for those that participated online. Is it working out still to have a virtual option? We of course love to have people be here in person, but we recognize that there's times when you just can't make it in person. So is this working for most people? Okay, awesome. Thanks again.